lot of people go through life doing things badly. Racing's important to men who do it well. When you're racing, it's life. Anything that happens before or after, just waiting.
Matt Williams got a brilliant start from the third row of the grid.
He's gone, he's hit him, he's straight off at the chase.
And a half-second lead. Oh, with the sizzling car in the background.
He has it. Oh, he's round on the last lap.
There's a massive, massive accident.
Next to the inside, what a move, what a move.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the mountain for the second time in 8 days. Last week, it was all about the qualifying, where you start tonight's race, but for tonight, it's all about pounding the bitumen around this 6.2 kilometre iconic circuit for 49 intense laps. Going to be a very, very interesting experience for a lot of these drivers tonight. It's the longest race of the season, the most amount of pit stops these drivers will do this season, and a little bit of strategy thrown into the mix as well. And of course, the inevitable drivers sharing with other drivers. What will that throw into the mix tonight? Steve DeVries here in the commentary box, or as most of you know me by now as Nether. And just waiting on the arrival of my co-commentator Hans Brunswick. He's running a little bit late. I'm not sure if that's because he's down in the pit garage just getting all the latest goss, or if he's actually late. But nonetheless, he's not here at the moment. He will be here very, very shortly though, expecting to make an appearance in the next 5 or so minutes. But in the meantime, let's have a little bit of a quick recap about what happened last week. Shootout was the name of the game. Getting into the shootout was part 1. Getting through the shootout was part 2. And the top 10, as they resulted from the shootout last week, they're on your screen. So Brenton Foley, no surprises there. We expected that he would be up the front row there or thereabouts. Went out in P9 in the shootout, second fastest overall in qualifying, and therefore was second last in the shootout, so he ends up on the pole. Lewis Wedding making a surprise guest appearance this round, went out fourth last in the shootout, ended up P2. Great job, set a very, very good benchmark. Lime Mitch, he went out fourth in the shootout, and his provisional pole time was good enough, almost right till the very end. Great result to get up into P3. Brendan Ross, P4. Phil Boak, a little bit of an interesting story about Phil Boak for this race tonight. He would have started out of P5, having gone out 8th in the shootout. He's unfortunately not here tonight. There's some family dramas involved in that. He is watching at home, so great to have you on board, Phil. Mitchell Hathaway, the HDS Racing entry out of P6. Termo, Zach Ross, Greg Nangle. Well, Greg Nangle, if you were watching the broadcast last week, had an awesome two-wheel moment over the top of the mountain up through Sulman Park and Reed Park on his way to McPhillamy, and that ended up putting him down in P9. He thought he was in the Tour de France. And then Will Devenish, the man who topped qualifying, he was the only driver to get into the 208s. Sorry, not 28, sorry, the 204s during qualifying. That was also bettered by Foley when he went out, managed to dip into the 204s. But Devenish unfortunately got out of the tram tracks, got out of the groove, got down to first gear instead of second gear at the cutting, and the back end got away from him and ruined the lap. So unfortunately for him, he went out dead last in the shootout, but he ends up at the bottom of the top 10 as a result. Still a very, very fast race car, but we expect that he will have a fair bit of work to do tonight. Driver points coming into tonight. Well, of course, there were no points on offer during the qualifying session last week. It's all about tonight. 300 points on the board available to the winner of tonight's race. And if you take a look at that margin between the PBF Race Engineering teammates at the top, despite the massive gap in terms of actual race wins, it's still Phil Boak who leads this championship by 171 points. So with his absence tonight, a win to Brenton Foley will reverse that situation at the top of the point standings. Will Devenish is not too far away from Brenton Foley, so he's the next challenger on board. He will also jump Phil Boak if he can finish in the top 2 or 3 places tonight as well. So big changes afoot potentially in the championship tonight depending on where some of these drivers finish. And if you have a look a bit further down, you've got Turmo and Cam Rutledge. They're still duking it out for 5th and 6th overall. So they're very, very close together. You've got Steve Burko, Brendan Ross. Brendan Ross is having a bit of a better turn of form than he has in the last couple of weeks. He had a good, solid qualifying and a good, solid top 10 shootout. So he's quite comfortably ahead of Steve Burko on the road for the starting positions tonight. Ricky Slick, well, we know that Ricky Slick's no longer a part of the Super 2 series, having been recently pronounced deceased in the United States. And then D2, BDS is down there in 11th on the standings there. And of course, we know that JP Courier no longer taking part in the series, but his point standings are good enough to keep him in the top 12 for the moment. There's a couple of drivers outside the 12. Brownie and Glenn Miles and Josh Ben, they're all lining up to try and rack up as many points as they can between now and the end of the season and try and displace JP Courier in the standings. Well, there's not much more to say about this circuit other than iconic. We had the qualifying session, the top 10 shootout session last week rather. And then we have just a 1 hour practice session, which is just finishing up in the next couple of minutes. And then the 300 kilometre race. And heading over to take a look at tonight's race information. There it is on your screen right there. The 49 laps that we will be doing around the Bathurst circuit. It is a counterclockwise circuit, 23 corners in total. We spoke about these items last week. The commitment across the top of the mountain in qualifying trim, very, very difficult to get right with a very light car. And if you could flow the car very, very importantly across the top, you would make good lap time. The top speeds down Conrod Straight, from the top of Forest Elbow all the way down the straight and all the way into the chase. All about how you perform that exit. The severity of mistakes, we saw that last week as well. The severity of mistakes is magnified here at Mount Panorama. You make a mistake, it will cost you big time. It doesn't matter where it is. We saw it when Phil Boak went a bit too deep into the chase. He was tracking like he was going to be on the front row, and then he ended up in the gravel trap, or just a little bit of the car in the gravel trap just before he needed to make the turn. So he ended up down there on the 3rd row of the grid as a result. And you also saw Will Devenish make those mistakes, getting out of the tram tracks, getting down one too many gears, going into the cutting. So mistakes hurt, and they hurt in a big way. The big thing about the commitment across the top tonight is going to be who can handle it the most with the worn tyres, the high fuel loads. As the fuel burns off, how is it all going to pan out? Well, we haven't got much longer to wait. The qualifying session was last week. The race session is tonight, and the practice session has just finished up. We will take a couple of moments, and then we will be back with the 49 lapper just ahead of us. Welcome back, everybody. We are live and just waiting for the warm-up session to finish, but it's great to be having a co-commentator in the box finally. Hans Brunswick has decided to join me. Hans, you've got a headset on now.
Oh, this is what it must be like to be all popular and famous and that sort of stuff. Hello, Stephen. Hello, everyone. We're looking forward to a good night's racing if last week was anything to go by. So it's going to be good fun tonight, Steve.
Yeah, definitely going to be an interesting challenge tonight. We're getting some word through that not only is this going to be a three-stop race, Hans, but this is actually going to involve some fuel saving from what we're hearing on the ground. 49-lap race, then most drivers are only getting about 12 litres, so 12 laps to a full tank. So this is going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, so it's going to become a fuel race. I think if they can all get fresh tyres in their stops as well, they'll come out flying. But the fuel will be a bit of disadvantage, and those who can't manage it, they'll be disadvantaged in the fuel race. So it's all about not buzzing the rev limiter down on the down changes, and also trying to you have to make it up with mid corner speed. So you end up throwing the car in at a rate of knots into the mid corner, and that's how you have to make speed when you're trying to save fuel. But it's just lifting off that little bit earlier, just coasting the car a little bit more, and trying to, it's like the real Bathurst actually. The other week, it's all about saving those milliliters of fuel, but we're talking about virtual milliliters now. So no, it's gonna be very challenging, and those who can keep a good pace while saving fuel, those are going to be the ones, and they'll be the usual suspects we expect, Steve.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. The usual suspects, as you like to put it. Well, speaking of the usual suspects, let's have a look at one of them right now. It's Brenton Foley. He's actually just been out on the track. He's just gone into the pit lane. He's just set himself a 2:06.7, which I dare say is probably going to be the kind of pace we'd expect from him in the race trim. And then we take a little bit of a look at who's behind him. We've got Lime Mitch. And now Lime Mitch was one of the star performers in the qualifying session last week. He did really well to get into the shootout. His provisional pole lap was actually very, very good right until we got down to Lewis Wedding at about fourth last man out on the shootout, who then surpassed it. Phil Boak then threw it away at the chase, and then of course Foley did that 2:04.9, and then immediately afterwards we ended up with Will Devonish going off the road, or going off the road, going a little bit out of control through the cutting, and ended up on the second row of the grid line, Mitch. So be interesting to see how he performs tonight. He's not a regular in the series, but he's in there competing hard, and like Lewis Wedding, making a special appearance tonight.
Yeah, it was a real shame to see Will Devonish not quite follow through on his qualifying lap. His qualifying lap, like you said, was very excellent. It was a 2:48, I believe it was. So Stephen nods in approval to 2:4.8 for my number recollection. But we were expecting Devonish to come out firing, and unfortunately, just a bit trying to squeeze the lemon a little bit too much, just going a bit too hard into the cutting, and unfortunately, that's where he came unstuck. So. It'll actually be Brenton Foley tonight. He'll be off pole, and he actually did 2:04 in that session as well, in that top 10 shootout. And that was a cracker of a top 10 shootout. And if we want to do a recap on what happened last week, Turbo got in with one of the great performances. He came across the line with 4 seconds to go in the qualifying session, and I've been talking him up the whole time. And as we see Lime Mitch go around in free practice, but Turbo, it just fantastic effort. He didn't give up. He just got in there. He dragged it by the scruff of the neck, dragged the Ultima up there in 8th place. Knocked Dwayne Davies out, unfortunately, but it got him up into 8th place, and he actually did a really good job in the shootout as well. So he moved up a couple of places. I believe he moved up to 5th or 6th. About that sort of range. So really impressive to see from Turbo. He's provided the goods under pressure, so that's what I really enjoyed.
Yeah, he did really well actually, Tomo. We just got him on the screen there. Sitting in the garage, one of the drivers that has elected not to go out in this 10-minute warm-up session before the race gets underway, running about 10 minutes behind schedule. The race was actually meant to be starting about 8:35 Eastern. We're now about 10 minutes beyond that at the moment. And good to see as well our fellow commentators over from the ASC in Stairs, he's in watching the stream tonight, and great to have you on board, mate. He is correct. Actually, when we're on the subject of Turmo has got some form. He was a very, very good driver through the Super 2 race that was held earlier this week on Tuesday night. I tuned in for that one. And there was a Super 2 race on Sunday, but there was actually a live stream a couple of nights ago that I was watching. So he's just corrected himself there. So good to see. And yes, Turmo has definitely got some form. He's also been racing quite a number of different series as Turmo. He's been racing the likes of the GT3 cars, where we've seen he's got the Jack Daniels Racing liveried Camaro. He's also had the Irwin Tools sponsored livery in the Monday night TCR Oz series as well. So got plenty of experience in a number of different categories. So he might be a little bit of a dark horse, maybe for a top 5 tonight, if any of these drivers fall off the road. So we've just finished a brief warm-up session. The qualifying we had last week, Hans. What are we looking out for in the race tonight? Obviously, we've just spoken about these 3 stops that we're going to have to do, plus the bit of fuel saving, plus to keep in the back of your mind too, they've got an outlap to do on this first tank. So everyone's going to be filling the tank right to the top. They're going to be going around super, super gingerly, trying to save as much fuel as they possibly can, because they want to try and stretch out the fuel as much as they possibly can and maybe buy a little bit of time somewhere along the line. But all it's going to take is a safety car in the right spot or the wrong spot, and this race completely becomes a dog's breakfast.
Yeah, and as we saw in the actual Bathurst race, the safety cars never fall when you want them to, which is the beauty of our game, isn't it? But not only that, the tyres will be cold when they come into pit lane, and if they elect to, the tyre pressures will come down. The car won't react the way you are expecting it to. So when they go out, and the problem is you have to make every, we're talking tenths of a second. You have to make it count on the outlap and the inlap. You can't relax. You have to try and get the most out of the car, but the problem is the car doesn't really want to budge that much. So the car doesn't want to do it. You have to make it do it without spilling the cup, so to speak, and ruining everything. And that's where the drivers can come unstuck, and especially those with driver changes. That could become an issue because you've got a fresh driver coming in, but they're not going to be well acquainted with how the car reacts, especially if the car has picked up damage, like through this area here, up into the run into Reed Park and Sulman Park. That's a hot spot tonight. That's where we're going to see people, perhaps later on in the race, they might be making some mistakes. It's going to be a long race. It's going to be a 300-kilometre race, and that's going to provide a bit of trouble for some of the drivers. They need to make sure that they're comfortable and that they're able to bring the lap time out as well, Steve.
Absolutely, 100% spot on there. And of course, we did mention in the broadcast tonight, very, very early in the intro, and also last week, about how severe basically the magnitude of the mistake. So no matter how small a mistake, it is very, very costly around a place like this. You were mentioning just before about the mistakes around that top section of the mountain, Reed Park, Sulman Park. The high-profile mistake, of course, from last week, the two-wheeled expedition of Greg Nangle, which we touched on just during the top 10 shootout, basically a summary of what happened from last week. So the Greg Nangle Appreciation Society, no doubt, will be on the hill at Sulman Park, waiting for their man to come across the top of the mountain tonight. Actually just looking to see where he is, and yes, he's definitely in there tonight, as our grid gets set for a warm-up lap, which I expect to be rather ginger around this 6.2 kilometre circuit. So top 10 as it stands, and there has been a little bit of a reshuffle, so let's work through this as it stands on the road. So the man who took pole position in the top 10 shootout, Brenton Foley, PBF Race Engineering, the reigning series champion, second in the standings at the moment. If he finishes in the top 2 or 3 spots tonight, he's going to take that position away from his teammate. Lewis Wedding, making a guest appearance in the Bathurst round this time. He's the lead Ford FGX Falcon. Got a very, very fast car. I think he's going to have something in reserve for Foley. If he can stay with him through most of the race, he will be a real threat. Great result from this man, Lime Mitch, to get P3 out of the top 10 shootout. Also great result for Brendan Ross. Had a bit of a bad run of form in the last couple of weeks, but has picked it up and done really well through the qualifying session last week. But what's he got in store tonight? Mitch Hathaway, he's the first of the ZB Commodores, the only one from the HDS racing stable. We haven't seen his teammate for a number of weeks, so hoping that everything's going okay for him. Termo, your man here, Hans, the 715 Nissan Altima, the top number of the leader of the Nissan Altimas at the moment. Zach Ross, the first of the Mustangs. Then followed by Greg Nangle, reportedly meant to be sharing with Matt Scruff Williams, but unfortunately I think Greg was saying to me outside of this that Matt may have gone AWOL at the moment, so we're trying to see if we can get a hold of him so he can share the drive aboard that FCR Motorsport number 373 Commodore. Back to Will Devonish, who's moved up a spot. So he was P10 in the shootout. He's moved up to P9 by virtue of Phil Boak not being present tonight. So, of course, that moves everybody forward one spot, which then promotes second Mustang, Dwayne Davies, into the top 10.
So in 11th now is Steve Burko in the beautifully presented Ford Mustang GT that was modelled by Anthony Birch. Fantastic job. I've just been saying how great it looks, and Stephen, you obviously agree. Then in 12th place is Cracker in the Cracker Racing Team Penrite Commodore number 64. Then following him is Cam Rutledge. He's not that far behind Devonish, in fact. So yeah, so I think that's a reasonable job, especially unfortunately for the other CRE Motorsport team car, not quite making it up to the further of the front of the top 10. Then at 14th, we've got the first of the Scuderia Alitalia cars, that's Mike Coulston. And then good to see Mike back in the series tonight. And then following him is the Miles and Rhodes combination for the SDS Racing. So that's the Spitwater and the, what's the DS stand for? No idea. Stephen gestures at me. SDS Racing, though, number 010. We're having a giggle over that. Then in 16th place, we've got Brian Walsh. Good to see Walshy back as well. We've seen in the Scuderia Alitalia cars, we've seen the Italian Aldo Benedetti make some appearances, but it's good to see the full complement of the Scuderia Alitalia team tonight. In 17th place is Peter in the Brad Jones Racing Nick Percat guest car for Dunlop Motorsport. And then I believe there's one more car, that's Josh Ben for PBF Academy, and he rounds out our 18 car field for tonight. So a really good compliment tonight, Steve, and hopefully we can see Josh Ben. He's actually made it home from work, which is great to see. He's pedal to the metal already, so to speak, metaphorically. So let's see if he can make up some spots. He's been a bit of a gun off the line, off the back of the grid we've seen in past races, so hopefully we can see some entertainment from him.
We certainly hope so. Looking for the rest of the grid just to get themselves in order, and it's a bit hard here, Hans, because there's the incline of the hill as it goes down, and there's some drivers have already been complaining that it is a bit of a challenge to get some of these cars with the tall diff ratio off the line just with an incline as it goes up and down. So we'll wait to see how we go here. Just looks like somebody may or may not be lined up properly. Alright, revs are rising, 49 laps await. Who conquers the mountain? The challenge starts now. Looks like a fairly even start, but of actual fact, it looks like Lewis Wedding got a very, very good launch from P2 on the grid, the rubbered side of the road, and him and Foley are going to run side by side through turn one and up the mountain. Looks like everyone's relatively well behaved. Just there's a little bit of a lag going on back there at the back end of the field, but it's Wedding who pops out the front just all but briefly. But Foley, well, I think Foley probably needs to just tuck in here and maybe save a bit of fuel, but that's not Foley-like. He wants the lead. He's trying to go around the outside of Griffin's Bend. There's marbles out there, and Lime Mitch might just get underneath as well here, Hans.
We've seen a lot of people out in the marbles into Griffin's Bend. They're now up into the cutting for the first time tonight. First of 49 times tonight. So Lime Mitch is up into second. He's managed to get past Foley, so great move there. And Foley, he needs to make sure that he stems the flow here because it could go all right for him pretty quickly. But we've got our leader at the moment, Lewis Wedding. He's starting to skip away from Lime Mitch, Brenton Foley, and Brendan Ross. They're your top four at the moment. Turbo's up into the top five.
Yeah, Termo's done pretty well to get inside the top five, having started P7, so already up 2 spots. That puts Mitchell Hathaway back 1 spot. Already Lime Mitch with a couple of wheels in the dirt at McPhillamy Park, a la Scott McLaughlin back in 2017. But it's Lewis Wedding who's trying to gap the field. but he's got to be careful. We did mention that this is going to be a fuel-saving type of a race, but already a number of drivers pushing limits. Lime Mitch understeered very, very wide at the corner just before the elbow, and he manages to get it turned in. Now, what does Foley do? Is Foley going to run with him here, or is he just going to try and make the passing move happen? Already, this field is starting to string out here, Hans.
Yeah, the problem is with the traffic, you can't quite follow too closely. As we see Foley's trying to make a move on the outside, and Lime Mitch thinks better of it. He just lets Foley through. So into the chase, he gets that done. Brenton Foley up into second place now. Oh, he's actually made quite a lot of ground on Lewis Wedding there. So let's see if Lewis Wedding's had a problem, because he was starting to skip away a lot more. Lime Mitch back into third now. Then it's Brennan Ross, Turmo, Zach Ross, Mitchell Hathaway, Will Devenish, Greg Nangle, and Dwayne Davies rounds out the top 10, Steve.
Yeah, here comes Will Devenish. He's trying to make a move here on Mitchell Hathaway, already up from P9 to P8. And Mitchell Hathaway is not an easy man to pass, but is he going to look at the move at turn one? Thought about it, but then again, probably thinks the right way at the moment. It's a long race. Will was one of the ones that was giving me the information about how the fuel was actually going with some practice they were doing last night. That was both the CRE Motorsport cars. They were trying to figure out where they can save the fuel, where they can roll out of the throttle, where they can just take that little bit. But, well, he's now decided it's time to go up the inside of Mitchell Hathaway just before turn two, and he gets that job done, although it's fair to say Zach Ross is a little bit loose on the exit of Griffin's Bend there as well. And then there's another little pack forming back here. So this is Greg Nangle hotly pursued by Dwayne D2 Davies and Steve Burko. So the Mustang's trying to gang up on the VF Commodore here.
Yeah, the VF Commodore looking a bit long in the tooth compared to the Ford Mustang GT, but these two Mustangs, they're trying to harass the back of Greg Nangle. Let's see if Matt Williams will make an appearance tonight, because Greg Nangle has got this handful of these two Mustangs behind him right over the top of the mountain, over McPhillips Park now heading down into Brock Skyline through the S's. Let's see if he can keep it clean. Oh, there's a bit of a lock-up there. So, actually, yellow flag. So, let's see if someone's gone off. Actually, someone did go off. Was that one of the silver cars?
Yeah, that was Devenish. That was Will Devenish. So, something happened. He's just dropping down the timesheets like a stone. Let's see if we can find what's happened to him.
DNF, in fact, for Devenish. So, that's all gone horribly wrong for him.
Here it is. This is what happened. Lost the back end coming down and straight into the wall. So that's most unusual for Will Devenish. That's a really, really bad mistake over the top, and he's obviously got terminal damage there, so that is the end of his race. But I'm wondering whether or not he's had any sort of other dramas to go along with it. I certainly hope not, but for the moment, Devenish out of this race, and that's a huge blow in his championship, because he had a very fast race car last week in the qualifying session. He was certainly looking like going to be a challenge maybe toward the back end of this race, but unfortunately for him, it's all become a cropper, Hans.
Yeah, Steve. Incidentally, Will Devenish has just come into the commentary box. Hello, Will. How you going? Unfortunately, we've seen you crash. What's going on?
Yeah, not happy. Tapped a wall and it's enough to blow the engine.
Blown engine, unfortunately. So that it didn't look that bad of an accident. So blown engine, how would that have happened? Would it just been feeding it gears down when you were about to crash?
No, it was actually the wall hit. In recent times, the cars have been a lot more delicate when you touch a wall, so it's enough to dislodge something in the engine.
Tough break, mate. Sorry to see. Commiserations to you from Steve and I, but you were looking good in this race, mate.
Yeah, made up a few spots off the start and was hoping to settle in for the long haul, but unfortunately it didn't happen.
Well, if you want to play roving pit reporter tonight, we will greatly appreciate that, Will, if that makes you feel any better, but I'm sure you'd rather be out there.
Yeah, I would.
Thanks to Will there, for Will Devenish, for providing some of the comments on what's going on. And back to you, Steve. You got some news on the head of the race.
Yeah, there's been a change at the lead of the race. Brenton Foley on the previous lap has taken over from Lewis Wedding, and he's now sprinting away. Now, I'm not sure how this is going to be for his fuel economy, if he's done any homework on his numbers, but he's already got a 1.5 second lead over Lewis Wedding, which has now just gone out to nearly 1.8. But you were talking just a minute ago, back to Will Devenish, about looking up and making up some spots on the grid. This is one of the drivers that you picked up on earlier that you expected to make some places. Have a look how Josh Ben's going. He's made up 7 places already. Granted, one of them is Will Devenish's DNF, but he's absolutely flying. He's made his way back onto the back of Steve Burko in absolutely rapid time.
Yeah, we saw at Phillip Island that Josh Ben actually had issues with the pit lane and the pit stop sort of thing, and he was just unfamiliarity with the with the Automobilista software. So unfortunately, that really stopped him from showing his true pace. But he was off the back then as well, and he managed to make up some spots. And now we're seeing the car is squirming everywhere. He's really pushing hard. But we can see that obviously he's a very talented sim racer, Josh Ben.
Yeah, certainly the case. He's had some really mixed results in not only supercars and Super 2 competition, but also in GT3 competition. GT3, the one that springs to mind the most, is that he didn't know how to change his tyres, so he ended up having to do tyres on worn rubber and then ended up with double front puncture at Spa-Francorchamps. But in some cases as well, the race around Phillip Island, he was absolutely lightning quick, but again, fell victim to the pit stop scenario. So for him, he's doing super well at the moment, up to P11 and 10th, 9th and 8th just ahead of him. So if he can just bide his time and pick up the pieces of what ultimately could be a bit of a battle pack here. Actually, we've just seen as well, D2's gone through on the FCR Motorsport car driven by Nangle as well. So you just got to bide his time here, wait and pick the right opportunity to make a move. Also behind Josh Ben as well, we've got Peter in the Brad Jones Racing, the Nick Percat car, making his first appearance for Super 2 in AMS Oz. He's having a pretty good run as well, up 5 places pretty much from back of the grid.
Yeah, pretty good effort. Oh, he's just rubbed the wall there just through McPhilmy Park into the grate section. So hopefully there's not too much damage aboard, but he's obviously got some pace and he might be a chance to catch up to... Oh, he's gone a little bit too brave into the S's there as well. So we just saw Cracker as well have the same issue and he just went over the curb. But Josh Ben, I reckon we just seen, like you said, Greg Nangle, he lost the spot to Dwayne Davies and Steve Burko. Josh Ben is right up there with Steve Burko right now, so he might be harassing the back of these two soon.
Yeah, very close. I just think maybe he might be just sitting there trying to save a little bit of fuel just to see what he can do. Of course, they had the opening lap, which was the formation lap before the race got underway, which did use a bit of fuel. And of course, they were all crawling around. We did see how, at a pedestrian pace, the cars were taking to the racetrack on the warm-up lap. But taking a look at some of the times that are being set at the moment too, Brenton Foley's got a 2:06.6 as his last lap of the race. 2:06.4 is his best. Have a look at Lewis Wedding. He's in the 2:08s. The guys behind are in the 2:07s and the 2:09s. So I'm not sure what these guys are playing at. Some of them might actually be in a bit of a strategic move here to try and put a bit of extra fuel in the tank in this race and make sure they can actually get to their first stop or where they want to conduct their first stop.
Yeah, that may be right, but we've just seen Brendan Ross. He's actually made a move on Lime Mitch, so he's up in a third, and his lap time is a 2 minutes 7.78. So that's actually a pretty reasonable lap time. He's about 0.2 of a second faster than Lewis Wedding actually. So he's about 2 seconds faster, or 1.7 seconds I should say, 1.7 seconds faster than Lime Mitch. So he's actually got a bit of reasonable pace on board, and he might be going the full pace early and just run the tank all the way to the end, and then just if he needs to make another stop, so be it. But he's trying to make it with pace at the moment.
Yeah, Lime Mitch had a good start. He got up to P3 and held P3 quite comfortably after briefly being in P2, but now he's fallen back towards Turmo here. So Turmo's now back into the top 5. It looked like he might have just given the wall a rub. Lime Mitch has given the wall a rub on the X of the Dipper as well. So these two, they might be trying to save fuel, but they're trying their best to make pace and save fuel, which is always I wouldn't say it's a deadly combination, but it's a combination that a lot of race engineers in the real world ask people to do. Make pace, save fuel, and the drivers just throw their hands in the air and go, you're asking me to do what? There's no such thing, but in reality, we know it can happen. It just takes a bit of time. Now Tsumo has a bit of a look. He actually got a really good run coming up and over the rise at across. They ran down the Conrod Straight, and now alongside, and wasn't quite far enough alongside to make the move. I don't know whether Lime Mitch rolled out of the throttle there or not, but all of a sudden, Turmo was right on the back of that FGX Monster Energy Falcon and trying to make a move through the chase, but they got through side by side, which is great to see. They gave each other the room. Turmo lights it up on the exit of the final corner, and we're getting now to the point, Hans, we're getting into this halfway point, or what people perceive to be the halfway point of the fuel stint. And just looking at some comments that we're getting here, we might be in the realms of some people saying they can get 11, some people saying they can get 12, some people saying they can get 13. So just all depends on how people drive the car, but Foley out in front continuing to set 2 minute 6s.
Yeah, I can think of two things that are not more diametrically opposed to each other than fuel saving and going fast. And here we go. Termo's trying to make a move on line Mitch up into the cutting, but he's not going to be able to do it. He's just on the wrong side of the road there. So Termo's speed is actually quite reasonable, but he's not going to get it. He's not going to get past up in the mountain section right now. They're still going up the mountain, so it'd be pretty brave to make a move up there. And maybe his next chance is through Forest Elbow and then into the chase. But yeah, I mean, some people are saying 13 laps. I believe Rhodey's saying 13 laps, but Alistair is chiming in with 11 laps. So no one could go past 11 laps on Tuesday night in the ASC Supercar race. So that could be an issue for these drivers. They might not even make it to the full 12 laps that we're expecting. It could be 11 laps or 10 laps, depending on driving style. So, yeah, like I said, could be very difficult work for these drivers cut out for them because they're trying to make speed and try to save fuel at the same time, which they couldn't get two things more opposite to each other.
No, absolutely right. We go back to the only other battle packs that was happening here. This is Dwayne Davies and Zach Ross, the two Mustangs running line astern. The John Player special car and the Mitre 10 car, they're still trucking along quite nicely. And just looking to see that Josh Ben has dropped a bit further down the timing screens. He was right in there behind Steve Burko. He's gone backwards. He's gone backwards to the tune of 3 spots, now back down to P14. Although D2's gone very deep at the chase, a la what Phil Boak did in the qualifying session last week, and immediately gives up P number 7 to Zach Ross. So that's a bit of a costly mistake there from D2. Let's just take a look at that if we can on the replay. Let's have a look at it from the onboard, from the bonnet cam.
So he's just got it all wrong there. So he's just pinched the little brake, possibly inside or outside front, and he just couldn't get the thing stopped, and he's just gone off the road. So Zach Ross, the Red Sea has parted for him.
Yeah, it certainly parted for him in a big way. Just listening there on the onboard, he actually rolled out of the throttle quite a lot, did D2. So he was going into fuel-saving mode. I'm not sure whether he didn't feed it enough gears or he didn't just press the brake hard enough, but he rolled out of the throttle extremely early as part of this fuel-saving methodology that a lot of the drivers are starting to employ here. But looking a bit further afield, the next battle pack behind them here is still Greg Nangle and Steve Burko. Now, Burko in the second of the Mitre 10 Top Gear Racing Mustangs is probably just tucking in here behind the 373 FCR motorsport car, maybe just trying to save a bit of that fuel. This is one of the ways you can save fuel around here, is let somebody tow you around the circuit. When you're being towed around the circuit, you don't need to use as much foot on the loud pedal. You can roll out of the throttle a little bit earlier. You can afford to let the draft just continue to tow you around it, just at that little bit extra, just to keep you in touch with that person. But the other thing too is the person ahead of you knows that you're doing it to them. So then what do? They then try to go a little bit slower as well. They try and find ways to break the tow. They don't want you to jump them in the pit stops. They want you to be behind them at all times.
Ideally, if there were two teammates in this scenario, you'd have them swap around and they would all be saving fuel and everything would be fine and dandy. But here are two teams, two opposing manufacturers, two opposing teams. I don't think Greg Nangle is going to be too happy for it for too long, but no, Steve Burko is getting the benefit at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if he's using about 70 or 75% throttle. That's going to be a sizable gain on Conrod Straight. He doesn't need to make the spot, he just needs to save fuel. And, I mean, they could cooperate, it's possible, but who knows? It depends what strategy they're going to go for tonight.
Yeah, it certainly depends on the strategy. Now getting down to the beginning of the 8th lap for these guys on screen. The leaders have already started their 8th lap, and Foley's got a sizable margin at the moment. Have a look at what the margin is, Hans. It's absolutely huge at the minute on our timing screen. It's getting out to near 10, actually almost 10 seconds now over Lewis Wedding. So this is fuel saving in a big way for Wedding. Foley's now dropped into the 207, so just getting over the 207, 207.178 to be precise. Whereas Wedding has now dropped into the mid-209. So I'm not sure if that was a scruffy lap or if that is just the way that he's going about doing saving. But considering his best lap is a 208 flat, I would dare say he may have made a bit of an error somewhere on that lap. Looks like it was across the top of the mountain. And believe it or not, even though Foley did a 207.1 that last lap, his first sector was purple. So what do we read into that? We read into that. Yeah, Foley's very good at this place.
I was going to say he's got a lot of speed, Stephen, but then you cut me off. I couldn't even answer the question. You already knew the answer. You never ask a question that you don't know the answer to, is the moral of the story. But no, Foley, he's got a heap of speed on board. And Lewis Wedding is not that good in the first sector either. So he's more than a second off Foley. And he's probably about 0.3 of a second off Brendan Ross. So not that good for Lewis Wedding. Maybe he's going into full overdrive mode, and literal overdrive, because it's all about fuel saving, isn't it? Overdrive.
Overdrive, I like your thinking. But then again, look at how far Brendan Ross is in arrears of Lewis Wedding here. He's only 1.7 seconds down the road. Having a look at the sector times, they were 0.3 apart in Sector 1 in favour of Brendan Ross, so he was the quicker there. Wedding was the quicker through Sector 2 to the tune of about 4.5 of a second. So this gap is just sort of ebbing and flowing a little bit. Brendan Ross is just going to keep Lewis Wedding in his gun sights, I think, for them. And if he can just continue to match the sort of pace that Wedding's doing, I think he'll keep him in good stead to stay on the podium here. We're just actually caught behind these two. These two here, Lime Mitch and Turmo, are still duking it out. But look who's just starting to range into shot here. Mitchell Hathaway and Zach Ross. Now that Zach has cleared the other Mustang belonging to D2, Dwayne Davies, he's now going to start to put a little bit of pressure, not only on Mitch Hathaway, who then is going to try and put a bit of pressure on the back of the Nissan Altima. Let's have a look at the lap times that these guys have done just on the last lap. So Lime Mitch is 2:08.3, so too is Turmo 2:08.3, 2:08.1 for Mitch Hathaway, Zach Ross 2:07.7. He's coming.
That's actually a pretty impressive effort, and he's actually that's not far off his best time in the race, which is 2:07.37. So Zach Ross, I can't get a read on him. Sometimes he's fast, sometimes he's slow, like in this race so far. But he's actually pulling up on the behind of Mitch Hathaway, and if he follows the toe of Mitch Hathaway and they get up there with Turmo and Lime Mitch, who are in a battle at the moment, they might be a reasonable chance to jump him in a pit stop. Oh, here we go. Crash into the wall, into the great section between Sulman and McPhillamy Park. That's not going to help at all. Maybe a bit of steering damage. We'll see how he goes into the S's. Not too bad, I guess. Jumps the curb a little bit of a lock brake. He's still pushing, but hopefully not too much damage on board for Zach Ross. We'll see in the pit stop if his pit stop is unduly long, Steve.
He gained a hell of a lot of time there, though, on Mitch Hathaway. Even with the rub of the wall at Sulman Park, he grabbed a whole of a lot of time coming down the S's and through the dipper. And check it out now. This is visually, you can see that the gap was what it was, and now what it is. And I was about to say, almost a little bit of bump drafting there, coming up and over the rise now down Conrod Straight under the Fuso truck sign. Zach Ross is going to have the high ground here through the chase, but he didn't use all the road. He made sure that he left enough room on the table to make sure he didn't encroach on Mitchell Hathaway's space. But then again, he took a lot of curb there at the chase. I'm noticing a lot of drivers taking different contrasting lines through a number of corners. The chase is one of them. Some of them take a lot of curb. Some of them elect to take just minimal curb, some no curb. And then also through the cutting. That's another line that a lot of people don't feel comfortable taking that wider line. Some of them like to take that shallower line, the one that Shane Van Gisbergen used to great effect with, I guess, the great element of surprise in the real-life Bathurst 1000. You like to sneak up the inside very, very late there, and some people just feel a bit more comfortable taking that sort of line.
Yeah, it's interesting because in a qualifying lap, you've got all the track to you, basically. But in a race, you actually need to practice sort of where you're going to pass people. Here we go. Turmo is getting past Lime Mitch here up into the cutting. That was a pretty reasonable move. He got that done really easily. So good speed for Turmo on board. And then back to fuel saving mode. We're going to the replay now, Steve.
Yeah, we certainly are going to the replay. A little bit of an issue with the key there. Got the job actually done at Griffin's Bend, coming out straight. Oh, and a big, big slide as well coming out of Griffin's Bend. That's a la Brenton Foley. And that actually gave Lime Mitch a bit of an incentive to try and take the position back. But unfortunately for him, he couldn't quite get the job done. And Turmo locks up P4 for the moment at least.
And Turmo has managed to hold that over the top of the mountain. Down for the run down the mountain now. We're just going through that little short chute into Forest Elbow, and it's all about getting maximum velocity onto Conrod Straight.
That's another one of the turns that everybody's taking a little bit of a different line, how they actually approach the right-hander before they get to Forrest's elbow. Some of them like to carry a bit of speed. The traditional way of doing it is to arrest your speed before the right-hander, try and move it over as far right as you can when you're round the corner to get maximum buy-in for Forrest's elbow and straighten your exit as much as possible. But it's a number of drivers having to do a lot of wheel work to not only get through the right-hander, but to recover it from the marbles after trying to overdrive it and overcommit themselves to that corner. And here we go, first round of stops. So in comes Turmo. So almost, I wouldn't say it's quite spot on the money, but this is a bit early. Zach Ross looks like he's coming as well, and indeed he has. So these two gentlemen are going to be the first drivers to take service at the conclusion of lap 10 for them. The leaders are still going. Foley is, he's got the whole length of Mountain Straight as an advantage at the moment. So let's have a look at what he's up to. So he gives the wall of the, actually inside wall of the cutting a little bit of a rub. That's a bit of an unusual spot to give the wall a rub.
Yeah, you need to be careful there that it doesn't send you offline and into the outside wall when you're coming out of the cutting, which could be interesting. But here we go into the great section. He's got it online through there, and he's coming through Silmwood Park, McPhillamy Park now. The car is looking absolutely hooked up, Steve. That car is looking fantastic.
Yeah, looks very, very good. Light fuel load, but worn tyres. But he's certainly managing the pace very well. He's dropped back into the mid-206. He's done a 206.5 on the last lap, which is only about half a second, or actually not half a second, half a tenth shy of his best marker, which was a 206.495, which was set all the way back, I think, on about lap 3 was the lap that he set that marker. Doesn't look like he's coming in anytime soon, though. Looks like the only two people that have taken service so far are Turmo and Zach Ross, and they've come out in P10 and P12 respectively. So they're on the road again, as Willie Nelson would say. Just can't wait to get back on the road again, and that'll be the mantra that Foley will have in his back of his mind when he comes in for his service. But he's not coming in this lap, so he can get 12 laps out of his fuel tank. Question is, can he go any further?
I don't think he's going to be able to go further than 12 laps. I expect to see him in at the end of lap 12, but if he goes lap 13, that shows how good the fuel economy is. Here we go, Brendan Ross up into second place. So what's happened to Lewis Wedding? Something's going on here, maybe a bit too much fuel saving.
Bad lap.
Yes.
There's a bad lap here.
Bad lap, yeah. So Lewis Wedding on the last lap round has done a 2-minute 11.04, so he's made a mistake somewhere. And Brendan Ross stands to capitalise from it. So welcome return to form here for the number 444 FCR Motorsport Commodore. Good to see Brendan Ross up there and fighting for a podium potentially.
Looks like we're getting some more stops as well. Mitch Hathaway's come into the lane, so that's the HDS Racing ZB Commodore. Looks like Lime Mitch is in the background as well, so he's also in. So those drivers have done 11 laps on this stint, and it looks like, yes, Lime Mitch is going to get out comfortably ahead of Mitch Hathaway, and probably at about the same margin that they were apart for the last couple of laps when they were battling away there with Turmo, Turmo's actually just gone through, and he's going to maintain what was the battle that they were in for fourth place, and look a bit further behind. Lime Mitch is not going to have a bar. He's going to tuck right into slipstream, and Mitch Hathaway's come back out ahead of Zach Ross. But this is really the battle pack here. These effectively, it was an overcut almost in a way, with Turmo pitting first and has gotten out ahead, but only just, Hans, only just.
That shows that Lime Mitch's pit stop was just absolutely great. It was just quick, easy service, and he's in and out very quickly. And Turmo, he had to give it a bit more welly up the mountain straight to make sure that he maintained track position. But he's got the advantage of warmer tyres now, and he's using that to great effect. He started to gap Lime Mitch over the top.
Yeah, he did have a bit of a lock-up going into the cutting there as well, so hopefully he's not going to wind up with a 50-cent piece that develops into something a bit larger over the course of this stint, because that's the last thing you want, is to be trying to battle a car with rotten, rotten understeer, but also where it returns the same position on the wheel all the time. We go back towards our race leader, and Brenton Foley is in.
So that's at the start of lap 13, or rather at the, start of lap 13. So, end of lap 12. That's actually really good fuel economy from Brenton Foley. Let's see what the others do. So Rossi's coming in as well. Lewis Wedding staying out. So that's showing that his fuel economy is superior with the slower lap times.
Well, this is something we're going to be paying very, very close attention to. Can Wedding get around for this 13th lap? So obviously the fuel saving that he's been doing, being in the 208s and the 209s, obviously there was a mistake in there somewhere as well. He takes over the lead of this race by virtue of the fuel economy. Foley was just on the move in the pit lane. We could see it in the background. And there he is. He's just emerged from the pit lane. So Brendan Ross is having a bit of a long stop here. And in behind then, there's Dwayne Davies. So that's the next of the Mustangs that have stopped, the number 55 entry. See the cookies there on the bonnet, and I get hungry for a minute. And looks like we've also...
Cookie Monster.
Yeah, we've got Steve Burko, and looks like the FCR car of Greg Nangle was in. Now, this is interesting. Look how close Termo and Lime Mitch are now to the back of Brendan Ross. So that was a bit of a long stop for Brendan Ross. I'm wondering maybe there might have been a bit of damage repair that had to happen there, because he definitely wasn't close this sort of distance away from these guys. He was a lot further up the road before the stops happened.
Maybe new tyres, I'm not sure. He bowls it wide just a little bit there, so potentially I'm thinking new tyres. Absolutely stone cold on board Brendan Ross's car. He's having a bit of trouble with the 444 Commodore at the moment, and he's actually, Termo is catching him hand over fist right now. He's trying to get past Brendan Ross if he can, but over the mountain it's going to be very hard for him. But Brendan Ross, we'll see if the tyre life gain that he's made, if he's actually made a tyre stop, it might provide something a little bit towards the end for him.
Yeah, that's another element that we didn't really pick up as to how some of the drivers were using their tyres. Apparently, according to Will Devonish, who's unfortunately no longer in this race, and ditto for Brian Walsh, it looks like he's bombed out about 3 or 4 laps ago now. He did mention to me that some of the tyres... Oh, Termo's very wide! Sorry to interrupt myself there, but Termo's very, very wide in the bottom part of the S's, and now under pressure from Lime Mitch, really hand over fist. This is what happened to Termo. Had a good sizable margin here over Lime Mitch, and I think just may have overcommitted a little bit coming down through the S's. Yeah, back end got away, tried to counter steer with it, and glances the wall. And Lime Mitch actually had to take a bit of an evasive line there to make sure he didn't absolute clobber the driver's side of that Nissan Altima. That was very, very close. But just to come back to the point that I was about to make, which I've now completely forgotten myself. That's right. It was all to do with the tyre wear. So Will Devonish had mentioned that a number of the drivers had said that the tyres were virtually gone after about 6 laps, or the best part of them had gone after 6 laps, but they were usable. Now, whatever his definition of that is, I will never know. But at the end of the day, some drivers may elect to try and get 2 stints out of a tyres for track position. But speaking of track position, here comes Lewis Wedding out of the pits, actually behind a lapped car in road. In actual fact, he's gone behind Brendan Ross, so that was the car he was behind on the road. But this battle pack has really started to close up. So Brendan Ross just up the road from Wedding, and then Lime Mitch and Termo tucked in behind. Good driving, it remains to be said, from Rhodey there. Actually, Glenn Miles is aboard that car now. Sorry, Rhodey, I do apologise. Miles is aboard that car presently.
I believe Glenn Miles is still aboard that car since the start. So Rhodey, he's going to jump in probably at the halfway point of the race, Steve.
Yeah, you're right, absolutely, Hans. I completely forgot that that was a car that was actually being shared between 2 drivers. Likewise, the Nangle and Williams car, the only 2 cars in the field that are sharing drivers tonight. And Glenn Miles has been in the car since the drop of the green flag, so he's still pottering around. And you're right, the estimate or the expectation is that anyone who's sharing a car would be doing about half the distance. So therefore we expect them somewhere in around the 24-25 lap mark, which is effectively where the second stop, in theory, if you're getting about 12 or in some cases 13 laps in a stint, should fall. What's happened to Lewis here? He's dropped a bit further back towards Lime Mitch and Termo now. A lot closer than what it was.
Cold tyres maybe. Cold tyres potentially.
Going into that fuel saving mode again perhaps.
Yeah, but there comes a point where the fuel saving, it actually is a margin of diminishing returns here, because you're spending so long of the lap driving around, you might actually be using a bit more fuel. I mean, that depends how long you're actually driving around for, but if he's staying about that 2:08 sort of mark, it's not too bad for him. I reckon it's going to benefit him.
Yeah, well, he definitely got 13 laps out of that stint. We got 13 laps plus the warm-up laps, so that does wonders, I guess, when you think about that, how much fuel economy he actually got in terms of his lap count. I mean, Foley's buggered off into the distance. He's some 26 seconds up the road from Brendan Ross. Now, Brendan Ross, I reckon's gone into a fuel-saving mode as well. Now, they've just crossed the line. Ross has done a 2:09.6. Now, that's his proper first flying lap out of the pits, whereas Wedding's 2:37 is really not indicative of what his pace can be, although it's starting to get a little bit messy behind. Turmo had a bit of a gambler's lunge, I'd like to call it, at Lime Mitch down at turn 1 and ended up on the wrong side of the road, so he's dropped a few car lengths back now, but this is going to be where they've realised that Foley's going to have to make another, maybe might have to make a splash and dash, but look, he's got 26 seconds up his sleeve, or nearly 28 seconds up his sleeve now. He's building himself a buffer. He's not waiting for anybody. He's gone.
Yeah, his speed at the moment is I think it's 2 seconds or so, 1 second, 2 seconds better than everyone else at the moment. So if he does go for the full-on approach and he's trying to make a buffer just to take that splash and dash at the end, it actually might work for him because his pace is actually that good. But you see that battle pack behind, it's actually starting to be quite a battle pack that's brewing. It's like a bee's nest that's ready to explode at any moment and bite you in the face. But we've got every manufacturer represented here. We've got Holden, Ford and Nissan. It's fantastic to see.
Right, indeed, absolutely right. It's definitely getting the manufacturer representation at the moment. Holden, Ford and Nissan, with a Holden out front. And the word coming through from pit lane is that it is a double stint for Glenn Miles, and then Rhodey is going to jump in, and there'll be a double stint for Rhodey at the end. So that's good to know. Although we still don't believe we've seen Matt Williams to co-share with Greg Nangle, so Greg could end up driving this one solo, which is interesting. Not sure what's happened to Matt, but if he's out there watching, we definitely welcome you to jump in there, Matt, and help out your fellow FCR Motorsport teammate as Lewis Wedding has a bit of a look here. Oh, Turmo with a late lunge down the inside of Lime Mitch at the bottom end of the chase. So that was a very opportunistic move. He's got two wheels in the grass here as well.
They need to be careful here, otherwise it's going to come undone for them. It's only lap 15 to 49. Yeah, a bit too brave there. I wouldn't have gone and done that myself. But sometimes you just need to take a deep breath and just let it, just let it sort of flow on a little bit. Go with the flow. And, they're starting to see a bit of biff and barge at the moment. But one of these guys needs to actually take charge. Otherwise, they're going to let Wedding and Rossi get away from them. And I think they've done that. So the ship has sailed there. And I think that was pretty much avoidable.
Yeah, I think that was a bit of a silly move. I know Lime Mitch was pretty much left the door open there at the chase for Turmo to come pretty much steaming through, which he did. I actually thought Lime Mitch had given up the ghost and ceded position at Murray's Corner, the last corner on the circuit. But then he decided to go for the undercut, and then they ran side by side down to turn 1. So not only had they already cost themselves a bucket load of time, but then they cost themselves another bucket load more as well. And as you're right, Hans, look how far Wedding and Rossi are already up the road. As much of Lime Mitch gave the wall a bit of a rub there as he came up and over the hill, but the ship has virtually sailed, and now I think Lime Mitch has decided, you know what, bugger you, I'm going to rub the wall again, and I'm just going to try and clear off away from you, Turmo. I don't want to be scrapping with you. I want to get back to the back of this little train that we had going so I can try and save some fuel.
I really liked the train. I was really hoping that, here we go, they're starting to come together again. This is going to be good. But this is using fuel for them, and this is using tyres, and this is making it more difficult for them to have a quick stop just to fill up the fuel. And we're seeing damage on board these cars. Turmo might have a little bit of steering damage from that glancing blow at the wall down through the S's. So I don't think these cars are going to be in good stead towards the end of the race, but anything can happen because this is Bathurst, Steve.
It is Bathurst, and it does throw up all sorts of weird, quirky things. We've seen that time and time again. Another little battle that's brewing back here is between Greg Nangle and our debutant in the series, Peter, and also it looks like Steve Burko's bought into this battle as well. Now, Zach Ross has been the big loser out of the pit stops. He's Steve Burko's teammate. He's about 12 seconds behind this battle. He was right up in the thick of things. Glenn Miles doing a great job getting out of the way down Conrod here, letting this train go through. But I'm not sure what's happened to Zach Ross. There he is in the back of shot, just coming down Conrod. But ahead of him, this little three-car battle continues to rage on. Peter's holding his own here quite well since pretty much all the stops have shaken out. He has come in for a stop. He was briefly in second place, got some great fuel economy, it's said to believe, through the first series of stops. Having a bit of a think about here. Oh, that's ugly. That's a bit ugly there. And not sure what happened. If Peter just turned in a little bit there on a bit too early, or if he thought that he was going a bit deeper, or if Nangle just went a bit defensive. But ultimately, up the inside goes Steve Burko, having to take a lot of curb, it has to be said, down there through turn 1. Let's see if we can pick that up on the replay. We're going to pick it up very, very late. Here it is again. What do you reckon of this, Hans?
Oh, I'm going to reckon I reckon there's a little bit of both in there. I think Nangle probably went a little bit too deep, and Peter started to turn in a bit early. So I think it's just 50-50 there. No driver predominantly are wholly at blame.
Yeah, I think they'll probably deem that one a racing incident. A little bit of biff and barge. It's not too terrible. I mean, it didn't upset anybody's race. A little bit of side to side, or a little bit of rubbing, as they call it, as racing. So I think they'll let that one be bygones be bygones. But it just settles down again here now. Nangle leading Peter, leading Steve Burko. I always get confused which one's which, but you have to wait till they actually come around to back of shot. So you see as Steve Burko comes here, he's got Steve Burko not only written on the window, but written on the back of the car as well. So as if it wasn't difficult enough for us to tell which car was which, it's easy enough for the drivers to tell who they're following. They've written their names across the back of the car.
Yeah, the problem is you just got to squint and see, oh, they're both orange numbers. Oh, one's a multiple of 5, the other one is 5, so they're both multiples of 5. 5 times 1, 5 times 6, wherever we're going. Oh, Burko, bit messy there. But we're seeing a lot of lines through Forest Elbow, so I don't understand why people don't track sacrifice a bit more like they do like Foley does, or like we see in real life, because ordinarily you're sacrificing everything to make it. But I don't know. It's maybe it's you got to think differently sometimes in sims, and maybe I'm just not cut out for that anymore. It's been a while since I've done sim racing.
Need to get you back into it. That's the important thing. I'm enjoying my stint in TCR Oz at the moment. It's great to run around again, and also enjoying my time in ARW whenever we get some things going on there. In actual fact, on that segue with ARW, if you haven't seen the video already, the 4 decades of Imola coming up starting next week, would you believe? So it's the Imola circuit over the 4 decades, and punctuated with the Formula 1 cars of the decade as well. So if you're a Formula 1 fan in general, you want to tune in for that one. So make sure you subscribe to the ARW YouTube page, also ARW on Facebook, Instagram. There will be a lot of activity coming up to that in the next week. So looking forward to that next Wednesday. Let's go back to the head of the field, or well, close enough to the head of the field, to second and third place, as Lewis Wedding's made a move stick somewhere in the last lap or so, and he's now cleared away from Brennan Ross. So he's decided, you know what, I've fuel saved enough. I need to close this gap down to Foley somewhat, because even though Foley is setting some great times, he's back into the 206s. A 206.8 was his last lap. Wedding needs to start trying to arrest this gap. It's now out to 31 and a bit seconds, and that's more than enough for Foley to make another pit stop should he have to, and then come back out onto the circuit ahead of Lewis by, I wouldn't say by a country mile, by at least a comfortable margin.
Yeah, Lewis needs to get a move on here. I think his fuel saved enough. I think he needs to start consuming that fuel and start to make a bit more speed and a bit less fuel saving. But actually, when you were scrolling up through the field, we saw Turmo. He managed to get the fence in between Sulman and McPhillamy Park. So that car is becoming a bit more battered lap after lap. And this is the fatigue that's starting to set in a longer race.
Yeah, absolutely. So Turmo's now gone back to P6, which has promoted Mitch Hathaway to P5. An actual fact for Mitch Hathaway, right onto the back of Lime Mitch's FGX Monster. It's a bit of a mouthful to get out. FGX Monster Energy Racing Falcon. There we go. I finally got it out. We've got to try and get the sponsors in, even though we're not...
You need a bit of Monster to start to pronounce that name. You're going to be saying Monster Energy Ford Falcon FGX. There you go. Monster Energy, caffeine, ginseng, all that sort of good stuff, isn't it?
Well, it's all the caffeine's all the good stuff, but I'm not an energy drink fan. I've never, believe it or not, the last time I had a Red Bull, it put me to sleep. That's the way that is. But speaking about putting things to sleep, it's the mother's car on the inside of the Monster Energy Falcon at Griffin's Bend, and that's a great pass. Textbook pass for Mitch Hathaway. Now he's got to get the block on, and he does. Stays right smack in the middle of the road going through the cutting, and that is a great job by the number 31.
If I had to quote Dire Straits, I would say that's the way you do it.
Money for nothing and your chicks for free. Well,
that's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about. Well, that's the hokey pokey's what it's all about.
Yeah, you put your left foot in, you put your right foot in, you take your left foot out, and you slide it all about.
All right, we're inventing songs here as we go. We're making song adaptations. It's
I think the fatigue is starting to get us as well.
Be watching out for the Hans Brunswick album coming to you at the conclusion of a Super 2 series. Let's have a quick run through this order. We're getting close to 20 laps completed now, so let's have a look at how the order stands. Brenton Foley, well, let's just say, pretty much since the drop of the green flag minus lap 1, he has been in complete and utter control. He loves this place. He's got a 30.5-second margin on second place at the moment, Lewis Wedding. Believe it or not, Foley's down at the first corner. Wedding's just coming through the chase. So there's plenty of gap between the two of them. We're actually just seeing Dwayne Davies with the DNF dropping down the timesheet. So while we're looking through that, we'll very quickly go and see if we can pick up what happened to D2. Looks like it's over the top of the mountain somewhere here. Oh, big slide into the wall. I'm wondering if that's some sort of a... Actually, I think that's an internet disconnection for some reason. That's definitely unusual. I don't think that is...
Highly unusual.
Yeah, it's highly unusual. I don't suspect that is completely his fault.
Here we go. Rhodey is going to be in the car this lap. So so Rhodey's in the car now. They've actually made a pit stop. And Glenn Miles jumps out after a pretty good stint. So that's about halfway in the race. He's going to double stint to the end. We've heard that Rhodey's going to double stint. And hopefully we're going to see them up and about in this race. And still running at the end of the race. They're doing a good job so far, staying out of trouble. Oh, Rossi, speaking of staying out of trouble, I don't think he stayed out of trouble there. He managed to get the wall. He just went over that curb. And unfortunately, at Griffin's Bend, that concrete does wait for you, and it kind of does reach out at you.
Yeah,
So here we go now. We're just seeing the replay. So here we go, on board with Brennan Ross. And how far does he go in? How deep does he go?
There's
The answer
miles
is
out of the tracks.
way too deep.
Oh, he didn't get the wall, though. That's the important thing. He managed to arrest the speed so much that he actually avoided hitting the wall. He went out of our camera angle just briefly, so we thought he may have got the wall, but that's a very lucky boy. If he did get the wall, he would have pretty much just given it a very, very light glancing blow, but it doesn't look like there's any damage on that car, so I don't think he got the wall. Very, very lucky boy.
Incidentally, Hathaway's in front of Live Mitch at the moment, so Hathaway's got a bit of speed on board. Potentially he could be catching up to Brennan Ross. I mean, let's see. I mean, he's not got that much damage on board, if at all, Mitch Hathaway. So the old mother's detailing product's working a charm, buffing it out, which is real good. He's flying the flag for HDS Racing tonight, Mitch Hathaway, and it's good to see him on the live stream.
Certainly is. Mitch Hathaway, of course, the winner of the very first race of the season in Adelaide, drove from the rear of the grid to the front of the grid at the Adelaide Street Circuit. So that's his claim to fame. It's the first time we've ever seen that done in any form of AMS Oz competition, driving from the front of the grid to the back of the back of the grid to the front of the grid. And he's just got some lap traffic to deal with here. This is Cam Rutledge, the sole remaining CRE Motorsport entry after Will Devenish's unfortunate DNF to begin the race, which is, I guess, taking a bit of a sting out of things here. Hans, you're pointing to something on the timing screens. What's going on?
So Lewis Wedding last lap round has done a 2:07.3. Brent Foley 2:08.15. So I think Lewis Wedding is trying to arrest that margin now from opening up even more. It's roughly about 30 seconds or so. It's hovering about that margin, ebbing and flowing around there. And Brennan Ross, he's done a 2:09.3 last lap round. Mitch Hathaway 2:08.9 and Lime Mitch 2:09.3. Turmo, meanwhile, 2:11.4. So he's actually had a stinker in the final sector. So that's unfortunate for Turmo. He's starting to drop off the back of this field. Maybe a bit of damage starting to set in as we see Lewis Wedding is pushing real hard over the top. Up through McPhillamy Park and down into Skyline, into the S's. But let's see if he's able to bring back the margin now on Foley, because it's actually quite a task with him being 30 seconds up the road.
Yeah, just getting some information through from the pits. The reason for the early stop for the Spitwater Cleaners PBF Academy car for Rhodey and Glenn Miles was that they, believe it or not, somehow they cut a tyre. Now, I don't know how that's possible in sim. I've never seen a tyre get cut. I know you can hit the different bits of bodywork if there's anything on the circuit from another car. I know you can get flats as well, but I don't understand how they've cut a tyre. But nonetheless, that pit stop got brought forward, and good to see that a number of our fellow commentators are tuning in on this live stream as well. So Matty Dunlop, Porsche 944s, those of you who saw him co-anchor with Darren Smith for the 944 Challenge, the Winton round of the Shannons Nationals. Great to see you tuning in there, Matt. And also good to see the Apex Rear Wing guys tuning in as well and giving thanks for the shout out for the work that they're putting in for the 4 decades of Imola. Great job by Madbird and Stairs. All the video work, the photo work, the editing work that goes in, those guys don't get enough appreciation for the amount of media efforts that they do. So fantastic job, guys. Great to have you on board for the Super 2 race tonight on the live stream.
Tell you what, 40 years of Imola, it's going to be fantastic to see period Formula One cars going through the unbutchered Tamburello corner. It's going to be fantastic, Steve.
Yeah, that's going to be one of those things across the decades, how the Imola circuit has changed and, of course, how the cars have changed to go with it. Now, of course, this circuit has undergone some significant changes over the years too. Obviously, the most notable change was the straightening, or what was the straight of Conrod Straight that went all the way from the elbow right down to Murray's Corner back in the day, and then with the Super 2 leader touring cars that came in back in the day, then they had to make the change to put the chase in.
Yeah, so the World Touring Car Championship round for 1987, the Bathurst 1000 was actually part of the World Touring Car Championship, and this was in the days of the Group A Formula, the International Group A Formula. The world came to Bathurst in 87, so they decided that they had to upgrade the track to modern FIA specifications, taking it out of that sort of, early 70s, late 60s sort of style of circuit firmly into the 80s, and that was following on from the Mike Bergman incident of 1986, where he sadly passed away crashing into the Dunlop Bridge near the end of Conrod Straight, and because the car got light over those bumps, and the chase was put in to meet the FIA regulations at the time, which said a straight can no longer be more than 1 mile or 1.6 kilometres. So they've added in the chase. It adds about 300 metres to the track length, but the cars obviously go faster year on year. So it's a bit of an interesting circuit history. If we want to go deeper into the circuit history of Bathurst, it actually started out as a inverted commas scenic road by one of the councillors of Bathurst back in about 1937 or 1938, and little did we know that he was actually a mad motor racing fanatic. So he actually wanted this scenic road to be a racetrack. So, I mean, all of the great circuits of the world, they're sort of street circuits. You can go to Spa, you can go to Circuit La Sarthe, you can go to the Nürburgring even. So these are they're basically like public roads. You can drive them, and Bathurst is like that. But for 51 weeks of the year, or a bit less than that because we've got other events at Bathurst, but most of the year it's a 40k an hour road. And Turmo off at the chase. So we were just speaking about the chase there. It's added a deviation into Conrod Straight, and he's gone way off there, and he's having a bit of trouble. He's going to fall back to Steve Burko here, and maybe to Greg Nagle before this lap is out.
Yeah, that's very similar to what Phil Boak did in the shootout last week as well. So just getting into the braking zone here and looking to see how he pulled up. Yeah, just pinched a brake on the way in. That's all it was. Carried a bit too much speed, left his braking a little bit too late. Maybe trying to make a little bit of pace and save fuel as we've been highlighting all night long, but just overcommitting himself too much to the cause there.
It's hard, we've been saying it all night, that it's hard to make speed when you're trying to save fuel, but Burko, he's starting to get a sniff of 8th place, and I don't think he's going to let it go at the moment. It's like a shark sniffing blood in the water. They don't want to let it go. They want to, it's sort of like trying to seek the prey, The animals, they're trying to seek their prey.
We're starting to get into this realm now, Hans, where the second stops are going to start to take place very, very shortly. Now, the first man to blink in the last sequence of stops was a bit further back down the field. It was Turmo, followed by Zach Ross. Now, Zach Ross has moved up to 5th place here. So what's happening here? So it looks like Turmo's moved back down to 8th, and just looking to see how this is all shaken out, because this is a little bit unusual now. Zach Ross is a bit further down the order, and in actual fact, Mitch Hathaway must have had a bad lap somewhere in all of this as well, because he was in front of Lime Mitch at one stage. So Zach Ross has moved forward.
Oh, Mitch Hathaway, he's actually done a 1 minute 22 in the first sector, so that's an absolute shocker. He must have spun somewhere.
Yeah, where would he have done that? There's a possibility of a few places he could have done that. Turn 1 springs to mind, and then of course maybe towards the cutting as well, or before the cutting at Griffin's Bend. They're probably the obvious spots where that may have happened, but that's a bit unusual. So that explains what we've seen then. Obviously unsighted to our cameras, and we're a bit too far back to go in the replay to try and pick that up. But nonetheless, that's cost him 2 places. And here we go.
Here we go, Zach Ross is in.
First round of stops is over a little while ago. It's about 12 laps on since then. Really trying to wrestle it through the pit lane entry road. So he was the first one to stop last time out. Let's go back and see if we find Turmo. No, Turmo's gone around again. Now, Turmo and Zach Ross came in together, so maybe Turmo's going to get an extra bit of fuel on board here, and he can go an extra lap, which will get him to lap 20, or completion of lap 24 at least, before he needs to come in. But the question is, can they go that little bit further and try and get into the one more stop to go window? Foley came in at the end of lap 12, so we expect that he'll be in, if not this lap, the lap after that, given you take into account on the previous stint they had the warm-up lap as well, the formation lap, which means he really got probably 12 and 3/4 laps out of that tank because the warm-up lap was at a pretty pedestrian pace. He's going round again, so he's going to get to lap 25, and if he can get 12 and 12 out of his next two stints, he'll be home with basically fumes to spare, Hans.
Yeah, that's if he keeps saving fuel as he is at the moment. But his last lap round was, the last lap prior to the one he's just done. So that's a 2-minute 8.0. So, and then Lewis Wedding is on a 2-minute 7.64. So Lewis has started off the pace a little bit, but Brenton Foley's starting to dial it back. He's trying to make all those last fumes count in the fuel tank and trying to stretch out his fuel economy as much as he can. But I would be hard pressed to put a bet past this bloke because he's actually looking on song right now.
Yeah, he hasn't put a foot wrong all night. A comment coming through on the live stream, Brendan Simons asking about safety cars, and yes, the safety cars are turned on. It's just a matter of where the incidents take place. We thought we may have had one earlier in the race for Will Devonish. Unfortunately, his incident just at the section that Foley's coming up to right now on your screen, just a little bit further on from here. So on lap 1, it was Will Devonish who came down this little section of a circuit here through the S's, got a little bit crossed up, went straight into the wall on the left-hand side there, and blew the engines, which is a bit unusual considering the damage model. We thought we may have had a safety car for that, but we did not get one. So the safety cars are turned on. We just have had very minimal of them this year. I think we had one at the very opening race, the very beginning race at Adelaide, and they've been few and far between over the course of the year.
Yeah, that's right. I think it shows that people are able to get their cars moving before the safety car goes into effect. So, but interesting to note that the S's has been quite the trouble spot. We've seen, I think, possibly about 4 cars. So Devonish, Turmo, Dwayne Davies is DNF there as well, and I think Lime Mitch. Lime Mitch. So those 4 cars, they've had trouble. And here we go, Brenton Foley in. So he stretched the fuel economy as much as he can to the end of lap 25. He's trying to make all the speed he can into the pit lane entry, going over the curbs there, and he's going to take service now. So is he going to take tyres or is he just going to take fuel? Let's see what he does. We'll determine, or we'll try and guess from the length of the pit stop.
Well, I dare say he took tyres at the last stop too, Hans. Even though we didn't watch the pit stop, I dare say he took them just by judging at some of the pace that he's been going at, punching out those 206s. And up goes the Jackson. Yep, he's getting all 4 tyres and fuel on the carp. His
Lewis Wedding is going around again.
Yep, here's Lewis Wedding going round again. So he's buying himself, I guess, that extra bit of fuel mileage just in case Foley can't make it. He's playing into his hands here, at least a second place at the minimum. Now, where's Foley in all of this? Foley's gone. Foley is actually out and gone and ahead of Lewis Wedding. So the gap that he had of near on 30 seconds was more than enough to get out and stay ahead.
Yeah, I think he's got about, let's just say that's about 2-3 seconds to spare. So we're talking about a 27, 26 second sort of transit time through pit lane, including his stop actually. So that's actually quite impressive. So here we go, the little wrench comes up, symbol on the bottom left of screen. Lewis Wedding is going to come in the end of this lap. Lap number 26, he's managed to stretch his fuel economy as much as he can. Now, Lewis needs to get a move on after this stop because he's given it up a bit too much early, but his pace certainly is there or thereabouts, and he could be able to challenge Foley if he gets up there later on. But hopefully after this stop, he starts to up the pace a little bit.
Yeah, hopefully he'll have enough in reserve to make it home from here. Well, this is lap 26 for Lewis Wedding, so that's another 23 laps to go. And if he's judging by the figures of getting 12 laps to a full tank, he will be more than safe and have a little bit in reserve to be able to push that much to try and close the gap down to Foley, but he's going to lose at least 30 odd seconds to Foley when he comes in this time around. Even though he's not that far behind him on the track, Foley has already stopped for the second time. Actually, almost good to see here as well, Hans. There's only 3 drivers that have gone 1 lap down in Mike Coulston, Cracker and Cam Rutledge halfway through this race. So 26 laps in, we've only got 3 cars a lap down, which is great to see. And actual fact, we've actually just noticed too, there's been a DNF for the roadie car, the Spitwater Cleaners and PBF Academy car. We're trying to work out exactly what's happened there. Looks like they retired a couple of laps ago as Lewis Wedding comes in.
Yeah, so Lewis Wedding coming in now. Let's see if he's able to make up some ground on Foley after this stop. But actually, I'd like to issue a bit of a correction there. So Mitch Hathaway, it said that he was doing he did a 1 minute 22 in the first sector. Now I've just seen Brent Foley. He's done a 1 minute 22 in the first sector as well. So maybe a bit of a he's done a pit stop and he's taken service. So that's why he fell back through the field. But yeah, Steve, I'd just like to correct that just to say that Mitch Hathaway has probably not made a mistake. And here we go, Brendan Ross. Speaking of mistakes, he's gone off at the chase there and he's going to lose a spot to line Mitch. And Mitch Hathaway, we're just talking about him. He possibly might get a position here. So let's see if he's able to. Brendan Ross not going to plan in this stint. He's lost a bit of ground. Let's see if we can see what happened. Yeah. There we go, into the chase, riding on board, locked it up. Oh, yeah, not going to get it stopped there. Just a bit too quick into the chase, unfortunately, for Brendan Ross.
Remains to be said, he powered out the other side quite quickly as well. He knew the others were coming and wanted to get on the gas and get going straight away, but just overcommitted at the chase. Not the first driver to do it tonight, certainly won't be the last, but he presses on and is now wedged in a sandwich between Lime Mitch's Falcon and Mitch Hathaway's ZB Commodore.
Oh, lock up into the cutting here for Brendan Ross. Very lucky not to lose a spot and lucky not to go into the wall there, so he managed to keep it. But maybe it's turning into a flat spotted tyre, like a 50-cent piece. Oh, he's looking very ragged here, so he might be a chance to lose a spot to Mitch Hathaway. Hathaway thinks better of it, lets him get away a little bit, provides a little bit of room, trying to get downforce back onto the nose of the ZB Commodore. And now into Skyline. Let's see. Skyline's been a hot spot over Skyline into the S's. Taking a lot of curb there, a bit hungry. Ooh, Ross runs a bit wide. Needs to not be so hungry there. And let's see, sliding, coming out into the short chute through into Forest Elbow. I was about to call it Murray's Corner, a bit too early for that. And maximum velocity onto Conrod Straight. So it's interesting. What you need to do is you need to fuel save on the way up to the mountain on Mountain Straight, on the main straight, and also down into the chase. But you need to keep on it at the top of the mountain because that's where that's where the race is going to be won or lost pretty much.
Well, Rossi looked like he might have gone deep here again, and indeed he has. There he goes. Second time in 2 laps for Brendan Ross. He's just overcommitted at the chase, and he's going to be lucky to avoid getting a losing position here. But no, Mitchell Hathaway decides, no, I'm going to pounce, because that could have been deemed to be a shortcut of the track, because you just basically powered out the other side, which is a bit of a no-no. You go off track, you'll pretty much have left the circuit, so you cede all rights to your position. And it's been a bit of a few scruffy laps for Brendan Ross here. 2 positions lost in 2 laps via a mistake, twice over at the same spot in 2 laps.
Potentially it's coming all undone for him at the chase. 2 laps in a row, like you said. Not a good sign for Brendan Ross, unfortunately. But there he goes. He's trying to fly the flag for FCR Motorsport up into the top 5, Brendan Ross. And there's Cam Rutledge behind him in the sole remaining CRE Motorsport Commodore. He's about a lap down on these guys. He might be 2 laps down. Oh, incidentally, Peter DNF. I've just see that behind Cam Rutledge on the timing screen.
Yeah, we're seeing a few comments in the live stream as well. I think Peter is brute in the live stream. It's just looking to see, he's saying he had some issues with some downshifting. So that's what's happening there. but not a good debut. But pretty good debut from our point of view, Peter. You're up there inside the top 10 for a little bit, so great to see new faces. Oh, as Mitch Hathaway gets the wall coming down through the S's. Now, has that cost him? Yes, it has.
Oh, no.
There we go. So there's a yellow flag now down at the dip, but can he get it going, and can we avoid having a safety car? He's going the wrong way, so that's going to be trouble for him as Foley sets the quickest lap of the race. Mitch Hathaway can't get this thing turned around. In fact, he's clouding walls left, right and centre. Now, what's that do for this? Oh dear. Big damage.
Come on, Mitchell, it's a lock diff. It's going to start crab walking on you on the angle there. It's just trying to get that car out of the way as much as he can.
It's a yellow flag and he's out. Over and out for Mitch Hathaway. So we were watching it live. We're not going to get the replay of it, but we saw him glance the wall on the run down through the S's, which upset his balance completely through the dipper, and that is the end of the ZB Racing HDS Commodore. That is a disaster for Mitch Hathaway.
Bit of a disaster considering that he was actually doing so well in this race. He was pretty much up there fighting, and we've seen him there or thereabouts in this race so far. So his pace was quite reasonable, but unfortunately all come undone for him at the S's, and I think he was just a bit too eager to get that car out of the way, and unfortunately just sustained a bit too much damage and a DNF for Mitch Hathaway. So not a good night out for HTS Racing, sadly.
No, certainly not, and also not a good night of racing for D2, the 55 Mustang. We're getting some word through that the PC that he uses to sim race has worn his boot in the live stream, so obviously computer dilemmas for D2 has put him out of this race, so commiserations D2. It's not good to see you out of the race, but we've still got 13 runners out of the 18 that started. In actual fact, probably for a summary of what's happened to the Spitwater Cleaners Commodore is Ben Rhodes, if he's in here. Ben, have you got us at the moment?
Yeah, I've got you guys.
Quickly sum it up for us. What happened, mate? What's the reason behind the DNF?
We lost the rear at Reed Park and smashed the wall, and as has happened before, the front corner took the engine out. It's such a shame because Glenn put down a solid double stint. His only fault was he cut a tyre off the wall. That's why he brought it in early, and I was debating whether to try and run it back to the same 12-lap stint or to try and hope for a safety car, but unfortunately I didn't get a chance to do either. So such a shame. Glenn did such a brilliant job, and for me to put it in the wall once and kill it is just a shame, but well, we'll move on and get ready for SMP next round.
Yep, sad to hear, mate, but at least you're looking forward to the next round, so commiserations, and keep watching the live stream. Like we're watching this little battle for third and fourth place on the road. Brendan Ross and Lime Mitch separated by 1.5 seconds. Probably one of the closest battles on the track at the moment. The only other battle that really comes close, as you can see on your screen there, is Steve Burko and Greg Nangle over 7th and 8th, and then Cracker and Mike Coulston over 10th and 11th. So we're 30 laps now into this race, so a quick digest of the race so far. Foley dominant, flying away at the front of the field, got 35-second margin over Lewis Wedding, and in actual fact on the last flying lap that he set was a 2:06.005 with purple sectors in sectors 2 and 3. So Foley not wasting any time. He thinks he's safe on fuel and that he can absolutely wring the neck of this car all over the mountain. Lewis Wedding's pretty much playing a distant game here. He played a fuel mileage game early, thought he was playing himself into contention, but Foley's done the same. Managed to keep ahead to the tune of over half a minute with less than half the race to go. Lime Mitch has fought well to stay third on the road, having started third. He's had to fend off advances from Termo, Mitch Hathaway and Brendan Ross behind. Of course, Brendan Ross started fourth, so third and fourth where they started on the road. So in actual fact, the top four positions, 1, 2, 3 and 4, where they started this race. So they've done pretty well. Termo up one spot to P5. Up from where he started out of 6th place. So too Zach Ross started 7th. He's now P6. Steve Burko started outside the 10. He's now moved up into P7. Likewise Greg Nangle, the Appreciation Society on the fence at Sulman Park doing wonders as Foley now dips into the 205s, just barely. And then the back end of the top 10 is Josh Ben, who's just driven a solid race, picked up the positions where the others ahead of him have fallen off the road, and then Cracker in the ZB Commodore, the Penrite Cracker Racing Team car in the 10. Rounding out the 10, the rounding out the rest of the field rather, the Scuderia Alitalia car of Mike Coulston, Cam Rutledge, the sole remaining CRE Motorsport ZB Commodore, and that is all. Mitch Hathaway, the latest of the retirees to come off the road, along with Peter, or Brute as he likes to be called, Rhodey and Glenn Miles in the shared 010 car, Dwayne Davies, Brian Walsh and Will Devonish, the other retirees in this race.
So it's going to be interesting to see, if I can get my words out, interesting to see if Brenton Foley will need to do one stop plus another stop to do splash and dash, but I don't think so at the moment, because his fuel economy is quite good, even with his cracking pace right now, and Lewis Wedding's just not able to match it, and his last lap round was probably about 3 and a bit seconds off. So unfortunately for Lewis Wedding, his back is up against the wall here, because no amount of fuel saving is able to fix his problems for him, I would say, for now, saving a mistake from Brenton Foley. But Brenton Foley, what the class of the field he is, and flying the flag for PBF Race Engineering with the absence of Phil Boak, and number one, showing why he's number one at the moment.
Just doing some provisional sums here with the drivers' standings the way that they are at the moment. So Brenton Foley, if he continues where he is and wins this race, which he was the raging favourite to do so coming into the night, he's going to walk away with what appears to be a 129-point advantage over his teammate Phil Boak by the time the night is out. Phil Boak, of course, not here tonight. The reason for that is some family trouble. I won't say trouble, but his wife's about to go in for surgery. So that was brought forward. So we wish his wife and the Boak family well. Now, we've just seen Zach Ross's DNF'd here as well. So we're trying to see if we can pick up what's gone in here. So that is the first of the Top Gear Racing Mustangs out of action, and no, unfortunately we don't have that on the replay, so that's happened a little bit too far back for us to see, so not 100% sure what's happened to Zach Ross. But just coming back to the provisional standings here, Brennan Ross finishing in 4th place on the road at the moment will take him up to 1,791 points. That'll actually move him ahead of Cam Rutledge, so that'll put him back up to around P6. Termo is going to finish in P5. He's going to stay pretty much where he is, but he will get very, very close to Mitchell Hathaway. He won't be that far behind, only 111 points in arrears, having started the night a lot further in arrears. Of course, Phil Boak, Will Devonish, Mitch Hathaway not going to score any points tonight, so that then means that Foley will go to P1. Boak will then go down to P2. Devonish will stay 3rd. Hathaway would stay 4th. Termo would stay 5th, but he would decrease the gap between himself and Hathaway. And then Brennan Ross at this stage would move up to P6 as it stands at the moment, Hans. So big swings in the championship as a result of this race.
It's like swings and roundabouts right now in the championship. Everyone's changing, and like we said, the run home with all these feature races, it's absolutely pivotal that you finish and that you get a good haul of points, because that could spoil your championship charge. And now we're starting to see Brenton Foley, I mean, if he can follow through with this, he's going to take the lead of the championship, which we should have seen a little bit earlier if his form was anything to go by. But unfortunately, with all those issues he had at the start, that he was just not able to show that form earlier. And now we're starting to see it now.
Yeah, his form has been really, really red hot. I mean, that's evident by the wins that he has tallied up, as we'll actually cut across and see how he's going. So here he is at the front of the field. And we've also just seen, looks like another non-finisher for Mike Coulston. So he was now come across in 12th place. There he is. He's already returned to the garage. And another one of the drivers that we don't have it on the replay as to what's happened. So that's a bit disappointing. We're starting to lose some cars left, right and centre here. So that now means we're down to 10 cars remaining in this race. The 18 that started, and only 10 remain, which is a little bit better than some of the other races that we've seen over the longer distance races. When we've seen races in the past where, you know, less than 10 cars have finished. So hopefully the remaining 10 cars can actually get home. But just coming back to Brenton Foley, we did mention his form has been red hot. Well, 7 wins on the season from the 17 races contested so far says that. Been on the podium quite a number of occasions as well. We add them up here on our screen. So there's 3 second places and 2 third places as well. And his worst finish outside of the DNFs and DCs has been 6th on 2 occasions. So always been in that pointy end of the field. So his form has been extremely good. Just those couple of disconnects at the beginning of the season really put him on the back foot to try and defend that number 1, but he's now going to have the lead of the championship for the first time with only a handful of races remaining. So of course we've got the Sydney Motorsport Park round, we've got Oran Park at the very end of it as well, and then of course in between we've got Sandown. So just the 3 races remaining in the season, of course all feature length races, which means pit stops and strategy come into play yet again. And I think with Foley having made that charge all the way from being on the back foot after the first couple of races to be now what we expect to be the leader of the championship at the conclusion of tonight, I don't expect that he's going to cede that lead anytime soon. I actually expect him to run away with it.
Yeah, and he's just doing it at the right time of the season. Coming to the close of the season, he's managed to get up there and he's going to be able to defend it from the front, as we have become so accustomed to seeing him doing. I just want to be a bit cheeky tonight. We saw both of the Scuderia Alitalia cars in the pit lane. Should we call their pit box the hangar?
Let me ponder that. Yes. That's a very, very good analogy. I like that idea. You're thinking outside the box, as we like to call it here, Hans. So you've not only got the album going out, but you're making notes about all these puns. And of course, I think that's not a bad idea. Of course, the Essendon Football Club's headquarters out there at Tullamarine is referred to as the hangar, and that's an appropriate analogy.
I call it the clinic.
Well, in days gone past it was the clinic, I would imagine, but whenever I go past this is the hangar, unless they've taken hangar down and put in clinic back up. But nonetheless, it is called the hangar. But I think that's a very, very appropriate analogy for the Scuderia Alitalia cars. And Josh Ben's about to be the next man to get lapped by Brenton Foley. Now, these guys usually live in the same Discord, although I can see Josh Ben's in the normal Discord tonight, the PBF Pro-Am and the PBF Race Engineering cars. Of course, they do a number of races together. The GT3 series is another one. Of course, the GT3 series picking up again next weekend, not this weekend coming. Of course, we skipped the round that was meant to take place across the Bathurst weekend, and rightfully so, Hans, because of course it's Bathurst and nobody wants to race during Bathurst. So the whole GT3 calendar has been pushed back a couple of weeks. So that means the round I was looking forward to the most, which is the Hockenheimring round, will take place on October 27th. And then we'll have another race 2 weeks later after that. And then the final 3 races of the season are going to be back to back to back. So that'll be the weekend of November 24th, the 1st of December, and then the 8th of December, the final 3 rounds in the 8-round GT3 Championship. So round 4 next weekend, October 27.
I'll tell you what, I really enjoy GT3 cars. I always think they provide some fantastic racing, and it's just, I don't know, it's just something different, something a little bit different than supercars, and it just takes a different skill set. So I like watching the GT3 live stream, and I'll be sure to tune in when the GT3 series gets up and running again.
I'm a bit impartial. I like the German tracks, and Hockenheimring has always been something I've pretty much loved racing at since the minute that I actually found it. Even the old Hockenheim or the new Hockenheim, it doesn't bother me. It's just one of those tracks that I really, really enjoy. So I'm really looking forward to the 60-minute sprint race coming up in a couple of days' time, in about actually 10 days' time, to be perfectly honest with you. Let's just see how things are panning out here. There's really not a great deal going on the circuit. We just look down the order. We can see the closest battle on track is the 6th and 7th place battle, which is Steve Burko and Greg Nangle. This is pretty much the only real battle on track. Now, of course, these gentlemen have come forward by a result of not only passing cars on the circuit, but also the non-finishers ahead of them. So Steve Burko up from his starting position of P11 up to P6. And Greg Nangle started on the 5th row of the grid alongside, or actually was promoted to 8th place by virtue of Phil Boak not starting this race. So he's up up 1 spot from where he started into P7, but not giving up the hope of getting another spot before this night is out. Steve Burko doing his best to defend. In actual fact, he's defending rather well for a number of laps now ahead of Greg Nangle. So I think it could be all down to when these final pit stops play out.
Greg Nangle is probably going to be hot and bothered at the moment because there is a certain someone that didn't turn up to race with him tonight and take the car over. So I think there was an issue with the helicopter getting into Bathurst, so Matt Williams wasn't able to make an appearance. And I also believe they did run out of Red Bull Cola for him. So I don't think that he was able to come here because the helicopter wasn't able to bring him here. And also there wasn't enough Red Bull Cola available for him, unfortunately. So Matt Williams, no show tonight. Greg Nangle, he's taking it all the way home. And boy, do the Greg Nangle Appreciation Society on top of the mountain, do they love it.
They certainly loved it. They certainly loved it on lap one as all the cars came past and they did the big hey, you've seen the Hey Charger salute. They did the Hey Nangle salute.
Yes.
The Hey Nangle salute. There they are. Here they are at this point of the circuit. This is where it is. Whenever he goes past, they're standing up and giving him the peace symbol, the Hey Nangle salute for his two-wheel antics. So the peace symbol, 2 fingers in the air to symbolise the 2 wheels that he had off the deck for that extended period of time last week during the top 10 shootout. And boy, they love it. Now, these guys are catching Turmo, so I'm wondering, has Turmo had a bit of a scruffy lap here? We have a look at the timing screens, and he's had an okay Sector 1, but he's starting to range into view of these two, and the gap is starting to come down, so maybe he's had a bit of a rough moment across the top of the mountain. Wait for these splits to come in and see what's going on, as our timing screen is always about 5 or 6 seconds behind. And in actual fact, it's a lot worse than that. And I'm actually just looking at the live map, and I think the Turmo must have had a moment somewhere just around McPhillamy Park, just judging by what we're seeing on the live map. So we'll give you those splits when they come up, and it's just a bit delayed with all the activity going on. But given how far behind it is, it looked like there was some sort of issue for Turmo up at McPhillamy Park because his car looked like it came to a dead stop.
Yeah, okay, here we go. 45.848 for the middle sector. So that's 9 seconds slower than Steve Burko. So that's why he's fallen back so far.
Yeah, he's fallen back a long way. Looking to see our co-commentator Matt Dunlop is looking for that Hey Greg Nangle pick from yesterday. We'll put it up a bit later on if we can find it. I'm pretty sure I've got it somewhere, Matt, but if you missed the broadcast last week, it was a picture shared by fellow FCR teammate Brendan Ross. It was a Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon, I think it was.
No,
that was
it was
on 2 wheels with someone standing on it.
No, it was actually a 70 series Land Cruiser, like one of those new 70 series ones, those real retro new ones that they still make, the classic troop carrier type thing. And they were like, how many blokes were sitting inside? Like 5 blokes sitting inside it, and then there was one standing on top of it giving the salute. And I believe the one standing on top and giving it a salute was Greg Nangle over the top of the mountain. And that was what the photograph was of. So Brendan Rossi actually managed to make a trip up to the mountain and went to the Greg Nangle Appreciation Society, and they got the photograph of it. And the Greg Nangle Appreciation Society, they've got the Hey Charger salute, Hey Charger style salute. It's Hey Nangle for 2 wheels, like you explained before. But yeah, we would love to show that picture at the end. I greatly enjoy that picture as well, and I didn't want to be silly and ask it. But thank you, Matt, because now we're going to see it at the end of the race. It's going to be bloody good.
Yeah, I'll have to dig it up between now and the end of the race. We'll dig it up during the post-race interviews. Just looking at Turmo, so he did have that mistake across the top of the mountain, but whatever he has done, it must have been a blip on the radar for him, because he's now got that gap back out to 1.8 seconds, and looks like we're starting to get the first of the third stoppers going in. Lime Mitch, so he's ahead here, and actual fact, it looks like he had stopped on the previous lap, so this is his first flying lap after having come out from the pit stop. The 2:38.0 at the bottom of your screen is an indication of that. So Lime Mitch has got 13 laps to get home. He pretty much needs to go into a fuel conservation mode here, Hans, because a number of the drivers we've seen have been able to get 13 laps out of it. Oh, geez, that's very wide going up Mountain Straight. I'm not sure if he was fiddling with the settings on the dash or trying to work out where he wanted to be with regards to his fuel trim or things like that, but he needs to put his head down and just focus on getting the fuel burn just right in this car. Otherwise, he's not going to make it to the flag.
He just needs to drive to a number at the moment and make sure that he makes it to the flag. Bit of a rub there up through the Reed Park section. and he's coming into the grate section now. So you've got to aim the car at that grate, the famous metal grate. And then now coming out of Sulman Park into McPhilmy Park. Car is on edge here, 200 k's an hour. Fourth gear, now back to third for Skyline, down through the S's. Bit of trail braking, off the brakes, onto the brakes again, second gear, and then into the dipper, very famous part of the circuit. Yeah, a lot of damage on the sides of those cars, on the sides of Lime Mitch's car. So maybe he opted not to repair damage in that pit stop. But yeah, he's got to be able to stretch this fuel mileage as much as he can for 13 laps until the end of the race.
I don't think there's a car that I've seen that doesn't have any panel damage on it at the moment. The only ones maybe might be Foley and Wedding at the front of the field, but every other car that I've seen has got some form of damage on it, whether it's a little dent in the door or whether a dent in the rear bumper or something like that. They've had contact with different parts of other cars and different parts of circuit. Big lock-up for Lime Mitch on the inside left front, and he takes the Brendan Ross line and skates out the other side at pace through the chicane. So, again, I did say it earlier, Rossi wasn't the only one to make the mistakes down there, and he certainly wasn't going to be the last, and I've just been proven correct because Lime Mitch has done exactly that.
Yeah, I think he's just pushing a little bit too hard on the outlap type of that deal. You know, not the outlap, but the lap after the outlap. Maybe he's expecting the tyres to come up a bit more, and it didn't quite. He leaned on it too much. It didn't quite lean back as much as he would have thought. So the yield there not quite as much. As we see, Brendan Ross is in third place at the moment. He's still yet to take service, I believe, and Brenton Foley has actually taken service the last lap round. So, as we can see, his first sector is 1 minute 19.34. That means he's taken service, barring some sort of unusual mistake. So he's right to go to the end. Another 12 laps to the finish. Let's see if Wedding is going to take service this lap. He'll have to because he's only about 12 seconds behind. He's going to have to. So the wrench symbol is on. And he's going to take service, and he's going to be right to the finish as well for fuel. And wow, what a strategy play that was by Foley. He's just very confident, and he was able to make that work, and he was able to just lead from start to finish.
Yeah, he's been able to make pace and save the fuel, so he's done really well. Wedding had a couple of wheels in the grass there as he takes to the pit lane entry, so this will be his final stop of the night. Likewise, we're waiting to see what happens with Brendan Ross. He's got to take service as well. Now, or in actual fact, has he taken service? I'm looking at the timing screens. Yes, he has. So he has taken service the last lap around. So he's going to stay ahead of Lime Mitch. I was waiting to see how that gap was going to pan out. So that gap has stayed at 9 seconds. So Brendan Ross currently safe from Lime Mitch as it stands right now. Can Lime Mitch hunt down Brendan Ross in these last couple of laps? I'm debating whether or not he can do this or not. I think he's got the pace to be able to do it. The question is, has he got the fuel? If he burns up too much of that fuel, he's certainly not going to be able to make it to the end. So you're going to be relying on a mistake from Brendan Ross here.
That's the risk with going the undercut, because if you do that, you're essentially fueled for one lap less, so you can't quite push as hard. You've got to, that has to come out somewhere, and it's almost robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. So Lime Mitch is just coming out now, so let's see where Brendan Ross is. No, actually, Lime Mitch is probably firmly in fourth place at the moment. Lewis Wedding, the gap to the lead is about 41 seconds again, and then another 12 seconds or so back to Brendan Ross. So they look pretty firm right now, saving some sort of catastrophic mistake or force majeure. But yeah, so top four at the moment, and Lime Mitch is actually fallen back one spot from his qualifying position. Oh, here we go, lock up into the cutting.
Yeah, just watching on the timing screens as well here to see that it looks like most of the remaining drivers have taken service. The Cracker's been in. We saw him come out behind, I think it was Lime Mitch or Brendan Ross on the way up Mountain Straight. Steve Burko's been in for his final stop. So it looks like just about everybody has been in to try and take their final stop, and it's now going to get down to who can get to the end of the race. Now, the interesting pit that I want to have a look at here, Greg Dangle's just taken service. And where's he come out in all of this? He had Steve Burko behind him for much of that that last stint. Now, where's Steve Burko in all of this? He's actually stopped. So has he? It looks like he'd stopped already, because I'd see that there was a 1 minute 23 next door to his lap time for the previous lap. So he's come in on consecutive laps. So I'm not sure what that's about. Maybe he wasn't sure if he could get to the finish. Maybe something wrong with the fuel calculation numbers there or something. But nonetheless, he's been in the lane for a fourth time.
Yeah, so maybe there's been a mistake when he's trying to set himself up for his next pit stop, and unfortunately he's had to come in again to rectify that. But here we go. Burko has forgotten tyres in his last stop, so those tyres were absolutely dead, and we've just received word from the pits that he forgot tyres in his last stop, and he had to go around again on those poor tyres. They were pretty much hurting on the way round, and then come in for new boots for Steve Burko. So now he should be right to go to the finish, but for his troubles, he's now a lap down on Foley, and he might be at risk of going a lap down to Wedding as well. Oh, into the wall there. So we've been running about 1 hour 25 minutes, 85 minutes straight. That's actually quite a bit longer than what we're used to in feature races. So unfortunately, the fatigue is starting to set in, and a bit of damage. Like you said, we're seeing panel damage on all sorts of cars, maybe except for the front two runners, Foley and Wedding. But everyone's pushing hard, and unfortunately does go over the edge a little bit.
Yeah, it certainly does. Everyone pushing as hard as they possibly can toward the end of the stint. It's actually getting towards the time that, believe it or not, not to the time, but the lap count that we ran when we were watching the Gfinity Esports supercars in the real life. They did 41 laps, which Foley's about to start his 41st lap now, which would equate to the 250 kilometre distance that they did. We're going another 8 laps beyond that, so a number of the drivers in the field tonight would have been watching the Gfinity Supercars Esports Series or E-Series, and they would have probably liked what they've seen. Actually, a number of them have driven in iRacing before and have come across to the AMS platform to do their racing now. So another 8 laps after this one for Foley. It's going to seem like a lot, but it's no stranger for this man. Especially, it's no stranger for a number of these drivers in the field, the likes of Lewis Wedding and Brenton Foley, who are used to doing some of the 90-minute and 2-hour races that we used to run back in the GT3 Endurance Championships as well. So they're quite used to these longer distance races and doing them solo. They're races that you never shared the car with anybody else. So they're probably the ones that, as they're at the pointy end of the field, positions 1 and 2. In actual fact, Brendan Ross in P3 as well is another one of those people. And Greg Nangle down there in P6, he's quite familiar with the GT3 and the longer distance format as well. So endurance and stamina won't be such an issue for them in terms of time. Just in terms of the type of circuit that we're dealing with here is where it's going to come into play.
Yeah, it's all about muscle memory in these longer races. You just have to have all these things running on autopilot in your head. You just need to know where to brake, and you don't need to think, oh, here is where I need to brake. Here is where I need to start turning it. No, that's supposed to be going on in the background. And what you're worrying about is then the position of other cars relative to you, your spatial awareness, and also what are the setup changes you need to make? What are you noticing with the car, and what do you need to do to get the most out of it? So that's talking about, do you want to make a tyre change at the next stop? Do you want to add more fuel? Do you want to pit a lap early? What is the strategy? That sort of stuff that you're able to free your mind on. And those that, like you said, they do the longer GT3 races that we used to run in the past, that those are the ones that they're going to benefit from it, because they can just get into that rhythm. And like you said, each track is a little bit different. Every track has a rhythm, and it's a different song for each one. So where you pick up the throttle, you've got all these markers in your mind, where you apply the brakes, where you turn in. These are all markers in your mind that it should just be running almost like a computer in a sense, or like a robot. And the better drivers that are able to do that are the ones that they benefit in these longer races.
Well, this is the longest race of the season that we do. The 300 kilometres is a bit unexpected when the calendar came out. Everyone looked at it and gone, "Are you serious? We're doing 300 kilometres?" Considering the longer distance feature races are only 175 k's. And of course the sprint races we do are 60 kilometres each, or thereabouts, and we do 2 of them with the sprint races. So we haven't got any more of those to do this season, but we have got 3 175k races to go. So after tonight, if you take the 300 points off the table for tonight's winner, there's only another 900 points maximum on the table between now and the end of November. There's 3 more races to go. A couple of weeks' time, 2 more weeks from now, we will be doing the Sydney Motorsport Park in lieu of the Gold Coast event. Now, a lot of people have piped up recently and asked why the Gold Coast event is not being run. We're running Sydney instead of that. There was a little bit of trouble with the actual racetrack last year in terms of how the track cuts were, I guess, enforced and how the track was actually done. I wasn't sort of privy to how it was all said and done, but it didn't go according to plan, I guess, or didn't go according to how it wanted to be organised. So the decision was made to take that out of the equation and substitute it for another race, which Sydney Motorsport Park was chosen. Of course, Sandown is Sandown. We're always going to get that. And then Oran Park at the end of the year is substituting for the lack of a Newcastle circuit. Now, I know that some people have said that there is a Newcastle circuit out there. There are some custom ones that have been done for private use, and also some, I believe, that have been converted. But it's just one of those circuits that we just haven't had the time to be able to get into AMS to the standard that we'd like it to be at for a race, and we'll probably look at that should Super 2 continue on next year, which at this stage I believe that it is. I haven't been told anything otherwise, but given the popularity of this series this year, it's been a fairly well turned out and well supported series, and I expect that it'll continue on next year.
Would be good to see, because a lot of drivers, they're making a name for themselves, and I would like to see them continue on and see them get to the front one day and start to fight with the big boys. So I would really like to see that, but we still got a while away till the next season. Like you said, we've got 900 points after this race. Ooh, bit of a moment there for Brendan Ross. He manages to get it stopped. Oh, yeah, a bit worrying there. Our heart rates went up there. So, so with the last 3 races of the season, it's only 900 points on offer for 3 feature races. The people who are behind in the championship, they are running out of chances to get up, and they need to start making the most of those chances.
Yeah, they sure do. People like Brendan Ross here on the screen. So he was a little bit further up the standings earlier in the season. He was up as high as, I think, 3rd or 4th at one stage for some of the results that he'd had. Actual fact, look at the start of his season here, Hans. He had a 3rd place in Adelaide. He won the first race at Albert Park, 2nd in the second race at Albert Park, and then 3rd at the first race at Symmons Plains, 4th at the second race at Symmons Plains. Then it all sort of went a bit off the rails for him. DNF, an 8th place, another DNF, an 11th, 5th and 9th DNF, and he's had 5 DNFs since that first third or quarter of the season was gone. So it hasn't been as good a run through the championship as he'd like. Now, where he currently sits at the moment in position number 3 on the road, if we give him the 3 points on our graphic, that'll give him 1,809 points, which would be good enough to promote him ahead of Turmo. But of course, we know Turmo is only a couple of positions behind. And of course, Cam Rutledge is still running as well. So it will vault him up the order a little bit. But you're right, people like Brendan Ross are fast running out of time to be able to make their charge in the championship, to not get to the front end of the championship, but to at least position themselves into a bit more of a respectable spot than what they are now.
And we've seen that Brendan Ross is more than capable of taking a race victory or podium, so he's running out of chances to actually start to put his name up on the podium positions or being able to get a race win. So I think maybe he's going to be able to do it. We're not really sure. We saw that he got the win at race 1 at Albert Park, but it would be nice to see him get up there just to close out what's been a very roller coaster season for FCR Motorsport. Oh, here we go, roller coaster, 360, pluck a gear, off you go, Brendan Ross. Oh boy, and he actually lights up the tyres as well for good measure. Well, wow, that was interesting.
That was certainly very, very impressive there from Brendan Ross, even though a bit impromptu. Well, let's have a bit of a listen on board from the windscreen cam. Just too much curb on the change of direction, and around it went, and I must say, put the clutch in, did the right thing, nicely saved, and just bagged it up on the exit. So one of those corners, that one is the 21st corner on the circuit, where it is a little bit tricky, and you just got to watch how much curb you actually take through there, Hans, because if you try and light it up, or if you try and change gear while you're on the curb, you're going round, and that's exactly what Brendan Ross did.
Yeah, ideally, when you take a bit of the curb through the chase and then through turn 21, you don't touch the curb at all. You're trying to keep all 4 wheels on the ground, get maximum drive. Maybe you ride the curb when you're coming out of turn 21 on the exit, but Yeah, I guess that's how it is. Here we go, up to Reed Park. Brendan Ross, he's still pushing. He's still on with it. And down through the Metal Grate, into Sulman Park, now into McPhillamy Park. Brendan Ross. And, wow, unbelievable, actually, effort. So he managed to get it spun round in its own length and then plucked a gear, light up the bags, off you go again. And here we go, he's pushing on. So he's no slouch, this bloke, Brendan Ross. He does a good job.
Speaking of pushing on, there was a purple sector from Brenton Foley on the first sector of the last lap as well. It was lighting up the timing screens at a 51.3 in the first sector of the last lap. So he is not resting on laurels here, and you can see, look at the way he's driving this car out of the cutting, just super hooked up at the moment. Light fuel load, tyres are rubbed in, it's got fair amount of wear. 51.1, well, it's just gone purple again through the first sector. He's just having fun now here, Hans. He's just really enjoying himself with 4 and a bit laps rather to go.
He's just going absolutely berserk, Brenton Foley. I think this is a bit like the 6 laps performance by Peter Brock and Jim Richards in 1979. But he's trying to really rub it in that it is his victory. And barring some sort of unusual or unfortunate circumstance for Brendan Foley, it's going to be his for the taking, with about 4 laps remaining in this 49-lapper, 300k event. There we go, he's still ahead by about 51 seconds on Lewis Wedding. Let's see what the sector time says. It's actually quite a fair bit behind live races. Here we go, 51.3. Yeah, 51.3 for Brenton Foley. And now we're just going to see what lap time he does on live races, but we're watching him right now, and he's certainly not backing off. He's still on it after 45 laps in the game.
Yeah, he's flying along here, Brenton Foley. He wants a 4. I can tell you now he wants a 4, but I mean that was a 6.8 that time around, so it was definitely close enough to purple in the first sector, but he just didn't get it hooked up in the last couple of sectors. Foley's a racer. Everybody in this thing's a racer, but Foley's, I like to call him the racer's racer. He just doesn't care what you tell him. If you tell him to save fuel, he'll just want to just go. It's like Lewis Wedding last week. He was being held at the pit exit by the car controller for the qualifying session for the top 10 shootout, and he just wanted to go. He said he didn't care. He wasn't waiting for Rody, the car controller, to let him out. He wanted to go. Rody had to tell him, no, you're staying here until we get to the sector marker. And then no wonder he was already halfway up Mountain Straight when we picked him up, because he was just on it. People like him and Foley just love places like this. They just love to get out there and continue to circulate. Well, everything's pretty much settled down now, Hans. We'll just quickly run through the top 10 as it stands. So with about 2.5 laps to go, Foley's got a massive advantage over Lewis Wedding. It's pretty much almost the entire Sector 1. Brendan Ross is solid in P3 at the moment. He's got 21 seconds to Lime Mitch. In actual fact, that 9-second margin that it was when they took their final stops has absolutely ballooned out. It's nearly, it's 2.5 times that now. So quite comfortable for Rossi. He could coast it home from here. Lime Mitch, he's 4th on the road. Gone backwards 1 spot from where he started the race. So in actual fact, he's coming
in again for fuel. So that's going to be Splash and Dash. And hopefully this doesn't drop him down the order, but it's been a bit of a torrid time lately for Lime Mitch. He's been involved in a few battles, he's been in the wars, and we just see on live races that Brent Foley's done a 51.5 over the first sector. So maybe not absolutely purple as Matthew Dunlop has offered in the comments, but it's there or thereabouts. He's still on it.
Yeah, Lime Mitch is going to comfortably come out here ahead of Turmo. That was the next car behind him, but only a splash and dash means you don't have to be stationary for that long, so he's going to come out with it well and truly the full front straight advantage, but he is going to be lapped by Brenton Foley here, so that means Foley will have lapped everybody up to 3rd place. So Brendan Ross a little bit further up the road, so he won't get lapped, but Lime Mitch is not going to let this one go easy. He's going to try and get a little bit of a tow from Foley here, maybe to have a little bit of sneak up the inside. He wants to finish on the lead lap here. But Foley just too quick and just too good. And
I think he's just trying to see if he's a benchmark. So he's trying to use Foley as a benchmark and say, hey, can I be as fast as Brenton Foley around Bathurst? Let's see.
We'll certainly find out. Going back through the order, so Termo P5, so he's only up one spot from where he started, but nonetheless a good haul of points for Termo if he stays where he is. Greg Nangle's not that far behind Termo. In actual fact, Greg Nangle, I think, may have actually been setting some half-decent laps, and indeed he's actually about 0.6 of a second quicker than Termo on the last tour. So with a couple of laps still remaining, even though they are both a lap down, that is not 100% over. If Nangle can hook up a lap or two here, he might be right on the tail of Termo coming towards the checkered flag. Steve Burko, the only remaining the only remaining Ford Mustang in the field, believe it or not. We started with 3 of them. We're down to 1. Josh Ben's right in behind him as well. Now, this battle's certainly not over, 7th and 8th place. So we'll keep an eye on this as we get to the checkered flag. We didn't see this one coming because they've been marked as a lap down on our timing screens, but might be a little bit of a late dive here toward the end of the race. And then the last 2 cars running around. Cracker for the Cracker Racing Team P9. Cam Rutledge flying the flag for the CRE Motorsport Team P10. And the last of the cars currently circulating. Let's go back to this battle here. Steve Burko fending off from Josh Ben. What do you make of this here, Hans? Who's going to come out the man in front of the other? Oh, I was about to say, well, I just put the Moz on them.
Oh, you've answered the question for me without me being able to answer the question. So
I can categorically say that's the first time that that has ever happened, where I've asked you a question and then the question has just answered itself, like in the snap of the fingers. And Burko's really, really loose. He's really unhappy. I mean, he's clouded 2 walls now just in the last couple of corners as he tries to wrestle P7 back from Josh Ben. But I don't think he's going to do it, doing things like that.
Can you say self-fulfilling prophecy?
I can.
Yeah,
and you just did.
It's one of those things, isn't it? It's one of those things. But here we go. Josh Ben, he's managed to get past Steve Burko. Maybe Burko made that a little bit too easy for him, just running off the road. But Josh Ben, the red PBF Academy Commodore, is very menacing when it's in your mirrors. We're looking on the timing screens. What are we looking at?
Nangle is still trying to hunt down Termo. That gap is now stabilised at 3.8 seconds, so I don't think he's going to make any more roads now.
Responded. Yeah, Termo's responded with his speed at the moment, so it's in that sort of 2 minute 8.7, and then Greg Nangle's done 2 minute 8.8. So, yeah, so I think that that's it for Nangle. He's trying as hard as he can, but Termo's able to respond. He's still got enough speed to keep him at bay.
Yeah, he's just put enough distance between himself and Greg Nangle now for the one more lap that they have to do after they finish this one. They are a lap down, of course, so they'll do 48 laps versus this man who is on his penultimate lap, the 48th lap, and only got 1 more to go. Hans, what can we say about this utterly dominant? I think that is the only way that you can describe this race for Brenton Foley. This is the one that he wanted to win. This is the one they all wanted to win more than anything. That's why Lewis Wedding's in here, to try and see if he could give Foley a run for his money. But I don't think I've seen a more dominant performance like this. Granted, it's a longer race. Granted, you've got a lot more to think about, a lot further to go, and a lot more strategy to call out. But I can't recall any race this season, even the feature-length races, where we've seen a more dominant performance from one driver.
Yeah, it's been an absolute blowout for Brenton Foley in the number 1 car, showing us why he's number 1. And he's just proving it now with this fantastic performance tonight, and basically almost a lights to flag victory. He started off pole, did lose a position early, and then he lost another one to Lime Mitch. He managed to get past Lime Mitch. He managed to get past Lewis Wedding, and he didn't surrender the lead from there. So it just shows how dominant his performance has been tonight. He's 51 seconds ahead of Lewis Wedding, and he's lapped everyone in the field up to about 3rd place. So Brennan Ross and Lewis Wedding and Brenton Foley, they're the only ones on the lead lap right now. And like you said, dominant is the only word that you can use to describe Brenton Foley, and I would actually go and add 2 more words to that and say brutally uncompromising, because he has just not let off the pace all night, and he's just proven why he is a very deserving victor tonight. Lap 49 of 49, he's coming through the dipper for the last time, and then now through the short section downhill into Forest Elbow, and the last run down Conrod Straight.
The Holden fans across the top of the mountain showing their appreciation to the man with the number 1 on the door, and also sporting, I didn't even see it until now, the peace symbol on the back of the car there, just in the licence plate area. They're very similar to the Hey Nangle salute that the Greg Nangle Appreciation Society have been giving across the top of the mountain every time he goes by. But he's only got a couple of corners to go. And you're right, Hans, brutally uncompromising, utterly dominant. Whatever you want to use to describe the way that this man has gone about his business tonight, you will find a plethora of words to describe it. But he's going to come to the line, bag it up on the exit, and take 300 magnificent championship points. Brenton Foley is your race winner for the Bathurst Endurance Race in Super 2. A long way back here to the second place man, Lewis Wedding.
Lewis Wedding, he's done a pretty good job tonight, but not quite enough for Brenton Foley. And Brenton Foley's been absolutely rampaging like a bull tonight with the pace, the eye-wateringly fast pace that he's been able to set all night, and the superior fuel economy, which is unbelievable considering his pace. And Lewis Wedding, he tried to play the fuel economy game and unfortunately hasn't been able to pay off for him, but he's still going to come off with second place, and he's going to get up with some healthy championship points. Lights on for Lewis Wedding. And as he shows his appreciation for the Himry Repsol Motorsport team for providing a second place car on the day. Brendan Ross is going to be able to take the final step of the podium, third place, last man on the lead lap. And he's done a cracking effort tonight. We've seen a bit of everything from Brendan Ross tonight. We've seen him in trouble. We've seen him, here we go, he's having a bit of fun now, sliding out of the chase. And he's going to show a bit of appreciation to the FCR Motorsport crew for providing a pretty good car when all is said and done. Here we go, sliding around. Here we go. Done the 180, then the J turn. Look at that. Brendan Ross, third place in style. So our top 3 place getters, Brenton Foley, Lewis Wedding, and Brendan Ross. So Lime Mitch, bit of trouble there.
He's already across the line though, so he doesn't have to worry too much about that. He was a lap down.
That's right. Yeah, he's a lap down.
He's a lap down.
That's a really smart way to do it because actually, I think Mike said it just before. He said Mo went a lap down so that he does one less lap. Smart, and I guess that's a positive. Yeah. That made me laugh, though. That was fantastic.
Yeah. So Termo, at the end of the day, you're right, he did respond. He managed to respond to P5 to hold off the charges of Greg Nangle for P6. And then Josh Ben came home for P7. So that was a great drive from Josh Ben from the back of the grid, although there's a morphed Mustang into the side of that PBF car in the pit box there. I'm not sure they're sharing garages. Steve Burko came home for P8. Looks like that Mustang might be out of fuel. And then Cracker and then Cam Rutledge. They were the only couple of guys that were on the... Actually, they were inside the top 10, and it was only the top 10 that finished. So plenty of drivers not finishing this race, and a couple of big names too. Mitchell Hathaway, one of them, and the big one with only one lap on the board, or actually less than a lap on the board, was Will Devenish. So a huge blow to his championship hopes tonight, and he's certainly got to get his skates on and pretty much win all 3 of the next 3 races to have any shot of challenging the PBF duo at the top of the field, Hans.
Yeah, really sad to see Will Devenish. It just hasn't been the last couple of weeks for him. The top 10 shootout, it all went wrong. Qualifying was strangely good for him, but I mean, not strangely good, but considering how shocking it's been for the top 10 shootout and the race tonight, it's been a very torrid run for Will Devenish, and unfortunately it does put pay to his chances a little bit for the championship. But we've got some of our podium place getters up here, and we're ready to bombard them with questions. Hey, Steve? Now we'll start from third place because we'll just go that way tonight because we want to build it up to the winner, don't we? Now we'll go third place, Brendan Ross. He's managed to get third place tonight. A bit of everything, Brendan Ross, and a bit of a 360 coming out of the chase there, mate.
Bit of them. That was unexpected, but fun at the same time.
So a bit of a battle on your hands. I mean, bit in the wars, a bit of a battle on your hands with the car balance and all that sort of stuff. Hitting walls just over the top of the mountain, just that little bit. Would that have affected you at all?
No, not really. I don't think I hit them too much. If anything, just scrapes. But the car felt perfect to me. So it's the best car I've ever driven. So I guess it's a couple of hours that we put in during the week. But best car I've ever driven.
Yeah, the FCR Motorsport crew, they've done a really good job. Well done. Okay, yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, that's all right. No, I was just waiting for Brendan Ross to say something. I thought he wanted to say something else.
No,
But
my mic was down.
no, he's a man of few words, Brendan Ross. We like him. We like everyone here. And Lewis Wedding, our second place getter, the only race you've done this season in the Super 2 Championship, and it's been quite a good job by the Himbri Repsol Motorsport team.
Yeah, it was a pretty good effort. Obviously with limited running beforehand, obviously in qualifying, did a couple runs, or did pretty much just one run just to sort of sort out a race car. And the changes I made were pretty good. It was a really, really well-balanced car. I didn't really have the car sort of slide around on me pretty much at all, which is quite weird. Normally around here at the top, sometimes the rear right would overheat and I would slide around a bit. But I was able to get obviously good beat on the setup, and the changes we made were really good. I knew I didn't have the pace really to compete for the win. I was sort of hoping for a top five, obviously with the pace that some of the guys had shown, but unfortunately, Boki didn't show up, which would have made it. He probably certainly had the pace to obviously contend at the front, and obviously Will early on dropping out, being the fastest in qualifying and in practice. So it made it a little bit easier, but yeah, it was a pretty good race. Pretty quiet, but after sort of the first stint and a half. But other than that, yeah, everything went well. Car worked well, and good result.
Yeah, well done, Lewis. That's a really good job. You just summed it all up for me. I don't need to ask many more questions. And Stephen DeVries is with our winner, Brenton Foley.
Certainly am. Brenton, we were describing it on the final lap as utterly dominant and brutally uncompromising. Apart from lap one, where you had a little bit of a challenge on your hands, you pretty much cleared out, and we didn't see a great deal of you. But you love this place, and I guess that's all there is to say about it, isn't it?
Pretty much. As you know, from the start of this season, no matter how the season went, this was one of the races that I definitely wanted to win and was practicing a lot for. I've done a lot of laps of practice, and really happy with the result. Shame for Will to go out so early. I don't really know what happened yet, but I'll have a look at it later. But I know he had similar pace to me, but my advantage was starting up the front. But yeah, it's who knows what could have happened. But overall, when I managed to get to the front, I just managed my fuel, and there's one stint I had to manage fuel and get one extra lap out of. But for the rest of it, I was just kind of getting into a bit of a groove and making sure I didn't make mistakes.
Yeah, well, mistakes were few and far between for you. I mean, a lot of the time we were looking at the screens, and aside from the in-laps where the Sector 1 time obviously goes quite high because you're stationary in the pit lane while you're in Sector 1, we couldn't find a moment where you put a foot wrong. Apart from a couple of occasions, you might have been in, say, the 206s or the 7s, and you might have done a 9 here or there. But apart from that, we couldn't pick any of it while everybody, or just about everybody behind you, was rubbing walls and banging panels, and even in their efforts of pursuing you or trying to save fuel, they were the ones making mistakes.
Yeah, that's one thing I was really happy about tonight. I did make one turn. I grazed the wall of the passenger door, gave it a tiny dent on like lap 6 at the dipper, but other than that, I managed to keep it off the walls and keep it clean.
No, well, you've done a fantastic job, and of course, with your 300 points tonight, you have taken the lead of the championship for the first time all season long, and I guess that's something that you will want to keep, given there's only 3 rounds to go, and your teammate is the one behind you. Even though he didn't turn up tonight, he has still only got less than a race win, actually more than less than a race win behind you, so anything's possible in these last couple of rounds as we head to Sydney Motorsport Park next.
Yeah, definitely happy to have the championship lead. Not exactly the way that I wanted to get it, with him not being able to race tonight due to having a few things with life come up. But overall, I am happy, to be in the championship lead and look forward to the last 3 rounds.
Well, we certainly look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks' time for the third last round of the season, Sydney Motorsport Park. Job well done on your victory tonight.
Thank you very much.
And a quick look at the points standings heading out of tonight. Provisional point standings, of course, just in case anything comes up that needs to be investigated. But it is Brenton Foley who leads the championship with 2,793 points. He is 129 ahead of his teammate now after tonight's proceedings. Of course, Phil Boak absent. No points for tonight. Likewise, Will Devonish, no points for tonight. Did not complete the race. Ended up with that incident on lap 1. Likewise, Mitchell Hathaway did not finish the race. He ended up with damage and retired. So those 3 drivers did not accrue any points whatsoever. Termo's the big mover. He's moved ahead of Cam Rutledge by a fair bit here. He's nearly actually over 100 points clear, 105 to be precise, clear of Cam Rutledge now by virtue of his 5th place finish. And Brendan Rosfolt's ahead of Steve Burko now into P7 with a 3rd place finish tonight. So a couple of championship changing positions there, Hans, heading into the next round in a couple of weeks' time. Thoughts?
We're definitely getting to the business end of the season now, and you need to be able to finish and get a good haul of points to maintain your position. But in terms of actually trying to gain a position, I don't think it's very likely unless there are some serious DNFs. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely imperative that you manage to get up there and get some good points and try and get podiums and race wins if you can for those of the people that they're out of championship contention for the moment.
You're certainly right there. The guys that are out of championship contention for the championship win are the ones that will just be looking to solidify their places going over the next couple of rounds. So people such as, probably Termo backwards, I think, are the ones that are going to be in trouble. I mean, mathematically, they're still in the hunt, but in terms of where they finish the races, their overall race pace, etc., etc. They're going to need to have a lot fall their way in order to be up the pointy end of the field. So it's really going to be probably a race in 3 or 4 cars here. I'd say down to Foley, Boak, Devonish, and maybe Mitch Hathaway's an outside chance, just depending on how things go over the next couple of weeks. Now, I'm going to apologise to Matt Dunlop here. For some reason, I'm having some trouble trying to figure out how best to get this picture to come back in again, but we will get it up in the AMS Oz Facebook page in the next day or two, just as an appreciation or a little bit of show of support from the Greg Nangle Appreciation Society for his 2-wheel efforts. But we're going to end it there for the night. We've been going for nearly 2.5 hours, so it's one of those nights it's getting a bit long in the tooth for all of us. A big thanks to all the drivers, big thanks to all the guys on the live stream, big thanks to Hans Brunswick here for co-commentating this race with me. My name's Nether. Please drive safely. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye for now.